Committee will be in order. Good morning. Welcome to the Joint Standing Committee on Veterans and Legal Affairs. And my name is Craig Hickman. I represent Senate District 14, which are 12 municipalities in Southern Kennebec County. Our agenda today is public hearing, public hearing, public hearing. The intended order as of this moment, we'll go with LD 2000 first. Then we'll go to LD 2130. LD 2135, LD 2080, LD 2095, and we'll close with LD 2155, subject to the availability of the sponsors or their substitutes to present the legislation. But before we begin, we'll have committee introductions, starting on my right today with Representative Terry.
Good morning. I'm Parnell Terry. I represent District 108 in Gorham.
Good frosty morning, Quentin Chapman. I represent District 88, Auburn, Maine.
Good morning, I'm Jill Doosan. I represent Senate District 27, which is part of Portland and part of Westbrook.
Good morning, David Boyer. I represent the individuals of Poland and Mechanic Falls.
Is that Fairclough?
Sean Faircloth, House 24.
Jeff Timlake, Senate 17.
Good morning. My name is Laura Supika. I represent District 22, which is a portion of Bangor.
Thank you. We have our very able staff with us, Michelle Hebert, who will help with distributing testimony to the committee if you have brought your 20 copies. And we have our analyst, Rachel Olson, who will be taking notes for us to help us in our work sessions when we get to it. And so with that, I will open the public hearing on LD 2000, an act to update the campaign finance laws. Good morning, distinguished colleagues of the Veteran Legal Affairs Committee. Again, my name is Craig Hickman, and I still represent Senate District 14. I am presenting the department legislation and act to update the campaign finance laws submitted by the Committee on Ethics. And I am going to allow Director Wayne to come here right now and tell us what this department bill seeks to do. I do believe it came out of a working group. And so we'll go from there. No questions? Thank you. Welcome, Director.
Good morning, committee members. I'm Jonathan Wayne, the Director of the State Ethics Commission. And you heard right from Senator Hickman. This commission bill is the result of a working group that was pretty informal, that was put together by the commission. Our commissioners here, and when the commission is giving advice, and also when candidates and others file campaign finance reports late, that the deadlines in the last 2 weeks before the election, a general election, can be confusing, and they can also be burdensome in some cases. So this affects candidates. It also affects political action committees and ballot question advocates and the political parties too. So the commission put together a 6-person working group to see if we could make the deadline simpler and make the whole process work better in the last 2 weeks. Just to give you an idea of who was in the group, State Representative Benjamin Himes from this committee was in the group. So was State Representative Ann Matlack, Attorney Josh Tardy. It was actually Mr. Tardy's suggestion to put together this group. Attorney Lisa Prosiansky, Leo Kenny, who was a former Senate candidate, and Anna Keller from Democracy Maine. So I know there'll be a chance at the work session to go through more of the details, but just real quickly, this would modify 2 types of reporting requirements that come up in the last 2 weeks before the election. And if you look at the last page of the testimony, this fact sheet is to try to give you a 1-page summary of what it is, what the proposal is. So one idea of the working group is these 24-hour reports that candidates and PACs and others have to file. The idea of those is that all the transactions of all these different groups in the last 13 days before the election will be disclosed to the public and to you 6 weeks after the election. But the idea of the 24-hour reports is those especially large transactions, contributions received by PACs and parties, or large expenditures made, those ought to be available to you and the public if they're of a certain magnitude right away before the election. So the concept of the working group was, let's increase the threshold of what's considered a large transaction that has to be reported within 24 hours. The other proposal was to go back to how the law was in 2004, which is not to have the reports due 24 hours after the transaction, but 48 hours after the transaction. So it's to give candidates, PACs, party committees 1 extra day to file these reports, give them a little more breathing room. And then similarly, with respect to the independent expenditure reports, these are reports that are usually filed by PACs and party committees when they pay for some kind of communication that goes out to the public to advocate for or against candidates. So like they organize a mailing or they place an ad in the newspaper or on TV. They have to file a special report about that communication, and they say, we affirm that we made this communication independently of the candidates in the race. And also it provides transactional information about how much was spent per candidate. So the proposal of the working group is we don't necessarily need these independent expenditure groups to file a special report if they're spending $250 per candidate. The proposal is to increase that trigger to $1,000 per candidate. And then also the thought process is that they could also have an extra day to file the reports. So those would be due in 2 days rather than 1 day. So I know that was a lot of details, but I know there'll be an opportunity later on to sort it all out. But the idea is, like I said, is to make it less confusing and allow candidates and party activists to focus more on getting your message out, which we know is a really valuable activity where ballot question advocates, candidates are trying to say, here's why you should vote for me, here's why it's urgent you get out, and to try to rebalance that kind of activity with filing finance reports with the state. So, thank you very much. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Director. It's good to see you. Happy New Year.
Thank you. Happy New Year.
Are there any questions from the committee for Director Wayne at this time? Well,
Got
there
off
you
easy.
have it.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Is there anyone present who wishes to testify in favor of LD 2000? Anyone online? Is there anyone present who wishes to testify in opposition to LD 2000? Online? Seeing no hands raised, is there anyone present who wishes to testify neither for nor against LD 2000? Seeing no hands raised online, the chair will close the public hearing on LD 2000. Are there any questions from the committee for our analysts for the work session? Seeing none, we will move right along. Thank you, Director, for putting this together for us. We will see you at the work session in a bit. Not today, but in a future meeting. All set, Michelle? Chair opens the public hearing on LD 2130, an act to support employment opportunities for military spouses, presented by Senator Farron of Somerset. Pinch hitting for him is our very own Senator Timberlake of Androscoggin.
Good morning, Senator Hickman and Representative Topeka and distinguished members of the Joint Standing Committee on Legal and Veterans Affairs. I'm Senator Brad Farron. I just got back from the sunny South with a good tan. And here to present this bill of the Senate District 3, which includes several committees in Kennebec and Penobscot and Somerset County. Figured that's what he'd tell us if he was here, because that's where he's usually coming from. I'm here today to talk about a promise. It's being serious now. It's a promise we make as a state to support those who serve our nation. And just as importantly, the families who stand with them. LD 2130 is about keeping that promise. Right now, living within our communities is an incredible, untapped reservoir of talent, our military spouses. These are individuals who are educated, resilient, and ready to work. Yet they face a staggering 21% unemployment rate. Why? Because their commitment to their family's service means they are uprooted every 2 or 3 years. Their careers are put on hold, not for the lack of skill, but for the lack of stability. This isn't just a challenge for these families, it's the missed opportunity for Maine. In a time when employers are actively seeking skilled, dedicated talent, we have a motivated workforce right in our backyard that we could help integrate. LD 2130 presents a simple, powerful, and common sense solution. It provides a framework for employers to give hiring preferences to military spouses. This is not a mandate, but an opportunity. And a tool to help Maine employers connect with the exceptional talent pool. Think of it as a win-win. We help military families achieve the financial stability they deserve, which in turn strengthens the readiness of our service members. And we give the state of Maine a competitive edge in recruiting dedicated, skilled, and adaptable professionals. You will also be receiving written testimony from our partners at the Defense of the State Liaison's Office. In that testimony, you'll be provided a more detailed look at the data and the day-to-day realities of military families' faces. My purpose today is to frame the issue for what it is, a chance for Maine to lead and a chance to align our economic needs with our values. So far, 8 states have enacted legislation providing military spouses with employment preferences, in-state or private employment. Our neighbors to the west in New Hampshire being one. By passing LD 2130, we send a clear message. We are saying that in Maine, we don't just thank our military families for their service. We actively invest in their future. And in doing so, we invest in our own. I urge you to support this bill. It is good for our families and it is good for the state of Maine. I thank you very much. I'm willing to stand here and try to answer any questions, but Senator Farren and Melissa Willett will be here for the workshop. If you have any questions and we put them down in writing, they would gladly answer them to bring back to the workshop when it comes.
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate that very much. Are there any questions for Senator Timberlake from the committee? Seeing none. Is there anyone present who wishes to testify in favor of LD 2130? Madam. Good morning, Representative Himes and Representative Frost. You may both introduce yourselves as you get set before Director begins his testimony.
Good morning, Representative Himes, House District 38.
Happy New Year.
Good morning, Representative Sharon Frost, representing District 58, 6 lovely towns of Belgrade, Rome, Mount Vernon, Vienna, and New Sharon.
Good morning. Director Richmond, Happy New Year. It's good to see you.
Thank you.
may
Good to see you
proceed
too.
whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Senator Hickman, Representative Speaker, and distinguished members of the Joint Standing Committee on Veterans and Legal Affairs. I'm David Richmond, the Director of the Maine Bureau of Veteran Services. And I'm here today also representing Department of Defense, Veterans and Emergency Management to testify in support of LD 2130 and act to support employment opportunities for military spouses. Smoothing transitions of active duty service members, reservists, and National Guard members back to our state or back into civilian life after a deployment is a very important mission of our department. This includes providing all available supports to their spouses as they also transition with their families. The Maine Bureau of Veteran Services, through our Welcome Home Project, establishes contact with transitioning service members early in their planning stages of return. We connect them with state and federal benefits that they have earned, and we connect them with our veteran services officers, all veterans themselves, to make sure that they have access to all available support. LD 2130 clearly aligns with our mission. Our department will be on hand during the work session to help clarify details and definitions on how this benefit could be applied for Maine spouses seeking employment with our state. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Thank you, Director. Are there any questions from the committee? It would seem that this is a pretty straightforward bill. The current law says that veterans who have served and their spouses, this is veterans who are serving and their spouses. Is that really the only change we're making?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of your question, Senator.
The current statute defines veterans as has served. This is defining eligible service members as are serving. So is that really the only difference? Them and their spouses will become eligible for preferential treatment under this law.
The way I read the definition in the LD, it said eligibility is based on active duty of a service member of the active duty services or reserves of the U.S. Armed Forces or National Guard.
Yep.
So there's a lot of ways we could help define that, and we'll be here during the work session to help dig through those details.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We appreciate your testimony today. Is there anyone else present who wishes to testify in favor of LD 2130? Madam Clerk. If you're online and you're here to testify on LD 2130, please raise your virtual hand and keep it raised until we call you. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Margaret Addy. I'm the Legislative and Policy Analyst for the Bureau of Human Resources under DAFS. And thank you so much, Senator Hickman and Representative Supika, for letting me speak today. This bill is a very easy one for the State of Maine Bureau of Human Resources to get behind. The State of Maine already provides a hiring preference, which guarantees an interview to veterans and Gold Star spouses who meet the minimum qualifications of the position, providing them a foot in the door, an opportunity to distinguish themselves. This legislation merely extends that preference to the spouses of active duty members of the United States Armed Forces, Reserves, and the National Guard. Much is demanded from our military men and women. Often this means uprooting themselves when their partner is restationed or disrupting their own employment and making building their own career challenging. I personally know this as a former spouse of an active duty military member. This would have been very much beneficial to me, I know, in my career. In addition, during deployments, this may make temporary parenting alone and shouldering household duties by themselves. So these things make it hard for careers to progress. The state is Maine's second largest employer, and state jobs are highly sought after for their quality of workplace benefits and an opportunity to serve as well. And across our many departments and agencies, we offer fulfilling careers in a broad array of professions, as I'm sure you're all aware. Whether you're an attorney, accountant, biologist, equipment operator, nurse, social worker, engineer, all of those opportunities are available to work for the state of Maine. Working for the state can provide those stability, regular hours, and flexibility that a military spouse who is temporarily parenting alone could really utilize. This bill recognizes that excellent fit that the state and military spouses can be. We recommend that this be ought to pass. I just wanted to point out one little thing in the statute. I think in paragraph 3 of the statute, it also mentions bumping rights. And so we might just want to take a look at integrating the statutory language into that paragraph. It's just a little bit of an administrative note for y'all, and I'm happy to answer any questions I can.
Thank you for being here, Ms. Eddy. So you're referring to the retention preference, when it says any reduction in personnel in the state service, employees who are veterans or Gold Star spouses must be retained. And we would just add,
So I'm so sorry. In the statute as it stands right now, the one about giving the preference, the hiring preference in paragraph 3 of that statute. So I don't have it in front of me.
Okay.
I'm so sorry.
I see what you mean.
Yeah.
It just, we didn't continue to add that particular
Yeah.
provision in that part.
We might
of
just
the
want to
law.
think about
Yeah.
that, and I can be available if anybody needs us from Bureau of Human Resources at any work session.
Yes. Are there any questions from the committee? For Ms. Eddy? We appreciate you being here.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much. Is there anyone else present who wishes to testify in favor of LD 2130? Seeing none. Is there anyone present who wishes to testify in opposition to LD 2130? Seeing none. Is there anyone present who wishes to testify neither for nor against LD 2130? Seeing none. Are there any questions for our analysts for the work session? Seeing none, Chair closes the public hearing on LD 2130. We are going to move on. We have not heard from the presenter of the next piece of legislation, but it's rather straightforward. So I will ask Madam Chair to present. Chair opens the public hearing on LD 2135, an act to provide funding to keep Maine veterans housed, presented by Senator Nangle of Cumberland. Today, presented by our very own Representative Supika of Bangor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will present LD 2135 in place of Senator Nagel. This bill provides one-time funding to Preble Street to replace grant funding for landlord incentives, marketing and advertising, and past rental debts to support permanent supportive housing for veteran populations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions? Seeing none. We'll take testimony from the department and the general public in any order. Is there anyone present who wishes to testify in favor of LD 2135? Good morning. You may proceed whenever you are ready, sir.
Good morning. Senator Hickman, Representative Supika, and members of the Veterans and Legal Affairs Committee. My name is Dan Hodgkins, and I'm a Senior Director of Veterans Housing Services at Preble Street, and I'm also a chair of Maine's Homeless Veteran Action Committee. Our Veteran Housing Services program provides low barrier, high quality case management services to veterans who are experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness across the state. In fiscal year 25, we served over 582 unduplicated veteran households across the state. Preble Street is a member of HVAC's No Homeless Veterans Initiative, working in partnership with over 20 other organizations to end veteran homelessness in Maine. I'm here today to urge you to support LD 2135, an act to provide funding to keep Maine's veterans housed. This legislation represents a step forward in Maine's effort to end veteran homelessness through targeted support for best practice landlord engagement initiatives. A landlord incentive is a sum of money provided to a landlord who agrees to rent to a tenant with a limited rental history, a criminal record, or other barriers to housing, such as lived experience of homelessness. Another incentive is access to a risk mitigation fund to reimburse landlords up to $1,500 of unpaid rent or damage in excess of a security deposit. These incentives allow caseworkers to quickly secure housing for homeless veterans, as it separates them from other applicants in a competitive housing market. Between April and September of last year, we housed 166 veteran households. In 65 of those cases, we provided the landlords with an incentive, typically of around $1,000 to lease up a veteran for at least 1 year. All of the veterans housed or all the veterans that were leased up last year were covered by the Risk Mitigation Fund. Landlords appreciate these incentives, which mitigate their risk and allow them to better support their communities. And when they have another unit open, they often call us first. For Tim, a 32-year-old veteran, a landlord incentive was the difference between sleeping outside and having his own apartment. Tim was ready to start fresh, but his poor credit history made landlords hesitant to rent to him. When Tim's caseworker offered a landlord an incentive, the landlord agreed to take a chance on him. Today, Tim remains stably housed and recently accepted a job that put him over our program income limits. Radio ads are another best practice for our landlord engagement strategy. These advertisements run on local radio stations, informing landlords about the benefits of renting to veterans experiencing homelessness and explaining how to get in touch. In the quarter before we ran radio ads last year, we housed 47 veterans. Once we started to run these ads, we were able to house 74 veterans. Additionally, we saw a significant increase in website traffic and received around 4 landlord inquiries per day. Additional funding through LD 2135 would support landlord engagement for housing homeless veterans, a critical piece to ending veteran homelessness in Maine. We urge you to continue the state's progress towards this goal by voting ought to pass on LD 2135. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Hodgkins, for being here today and presenting this legislation. And testifying in favor of this, are there any questions from the committee? Chair recognizes Representative Hines.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here today. I just had a couple of questions, if you could indulge me. Are you the only service provider in the state that does this?
No, so we are part of the Maine Homeless Veteran Action Committee. So it's all the different service providers in the state who are working together on ending veteran homelessness. This Flex Fund originally started with a private grant, and Preble Street, we served the most veteran households, and we were able to volunteer to administer the fund free of charge. So that's sort of how we got put in this position. And we're just looking for funding to try to continue the work that's already done. But this is money that is available not just to Preble Street clients, but any veteran in Maine who's experiencing homelessness.
And
Proceed.
where are you based at and where else do you have offices?
Sure. So we're a statewide program. Our program covers all 16 counties, but we have offices in Portland, Lewiston, and Bangor.
Okay, thank you. That's it for now.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Representative Boyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here today. How much past rental debt is there right now?
So it's a hard question. And the truth is, this fund is not the primary source of paying past rental debts. We have a lot of federal funding that we use as the primary source. This money allows us, when those federal sources aren't able to pay past rental debt, to do this. So one example is we had a client who lived in a public housing unit. They had rent that was due from a previous tenancy. They were going to get evicted because it wasn't discovered at the time that they were moved into their new unit, but on a recertification. And our federal funding does not allow us to pay that past debt. This flexible funding allowed us to, so we were able to save this veterans housing because of that. But in the whole state, it's a lot. About 25 veterans become homeless every month. A lot of that is due to financial reasons, but we have a fair amount of federal funding. It's not enough, but it definitely helps. This is really just kind of plugging those gaps when the federal funding isn't available.
What efforts made to recoup the past debts from your clients?
I'm sorry, from the landlords or?
So there's tenants with past debt that the taxpayer pays for to get them in. What efforts made for the tenant to pay that debt back?
Yeah, generally that was a one-time sort of situation that doesn't happen often. Normally the past rent is when they're still in the unit. The goal is to try to connect them to employment resources if they're able to work, so they can become more self-sufficient. But there's no effort to try to get the money back from them.
Any reason why?
I think the goal is more forward-looking. A lot of times the folks we're talking about are on fixed incomes. Most of the people we work, in order to be eligible for a program, you have to be below a certain threshold of income. So they're already in a pretty big hole, and it would be more challenging for them to actually be able to get out of it, especially those on the fixed income.
One final.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What landlord groups are you working with?
So we work with all sorts of landlord groups, including the Southern Maine Rental Alliance. That's probably the largest landlord group in the state, but we have landlord partners, over 300 landlord partners throughout the state that we work with. We work really hard to build strong relationships with the landlords because, again, the goal is when they have an open unit, we want them to call us. We want to try to get a veteran experiencing homelessness into those units as quickly as possible.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the committee for Mr. Hodgkins? Could you tell me which quarter you ran these radio ads?
Sure. It was the, it was between October and Veterans Day last year.
Of 2025.
Of 2025, right. And we've done this a few separate times. We have housing searches where we try to house 100 veterans in 100 days. And we've seen similar success every time we are able to run these ads.
And do you have non-identifying data that you could bring to the work session to tell me where the 47 veterans were housed before the ads and where the 74 veterans were housed in Maine after?
We could find something, yeah.
I think that would be a very good thing for the committee to look at. If you could bring that for the work session, I appreciate it very much. And you can always submit that information to our clerk.
Great.
In case you can't be here for the work session for any reason. But if you are here, we could certainly ask you questions about that data if you have it. Any other questions? Chair recognizes Representative Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And then if you could also, I'd be interested in the radio ad itself and some of the web ads that you brought, the banner ads or whatever, some of the graphics. I'd be interested to see how you're marketing. Thank
Sure,
you.
absolutely. We do have a website if anyone's interested. It's nohomelessveterans.org. That has a bunch of, that's when we're doing ads, what we're trying to do is get landlords to go to this website to get more information. They can contact us, then we follow up with them.
Excellent. Any other questions for Mr. Hodgkins? Seeing none, we appreciate you being here today.
Thank you so much.
Senator Nangle has joined us. He is the primary sponsor of this legislation. We had our chair just introduce this for us, hoping that you would be here, and here you are. So welcome, Senator Nangle. You may proceed whenever you are ready.
Thank you. Let's see. Senator Hickman, Representatives, and distinguished members of the Joint Standing Committee on Veterans and Legal Affairs. I'm Senator Tim Nangle. I have the honor of representing Senate District 26, which includes communities of Wyndham, Raymond, Casco, Fry Island, and parts of Westbrook, the better parts. Thanks for the opportunity to present LD 2135, an act to provide funding to keep Maine veterans housed. As I'm sure the committee is aware, too many veterans who have served our country with honor are still struggling to find and keep stable housing. At a time when federal programs are being cut or delayed across the country, it's more important than ever that we strengthen the local partnerships that are already working. This bill is intended to ensure that Maine veterans can continue to count on proven supports that help keep them housed and connected to their communities. LD 2135 would provide support to the Veterans Flex Fund, an already successful program led by Preble Street and the Maine Homeless Veterans Action Committee, which includes the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, the Maine Bureau of Veterans Services, Volunteers of America, and Vets Incorporated, and Bread of Life Ministries, and more. The program provides small but critical assistance to help veterans overcome barriers to stable housing, such as covering unexpected rental costs, offering incentives to landlords, and conducting outreach to connect veterans with safe and affordable homes. The Veterans Flex Fund is currently supported by a grant that is nearly exhausted. This bill proposes a modest one-time appropriation to help keep the Flex Fund in place while that broader coalition continues to work. It is a short-term solution, but with one immediate real-life benefit for veterans who are at risk right now. More broadly, I hope this bill becomes part of a larger conversation on the role the legislature should play in supporting flexible, coordinated, approaches like this into the future. Approaches that have shown results and help ensure that veterans do not lose housing due to gaps we have the power to address. LD 2135 is a practical step to make sure that veterans do not lose housing simply because a proven tool ran out of funding. It allows the work that's already underway to continue and helps ensure that the progress that we've made does not slip backwards. Thank you for your time. I'd be happy to answer any questions. We are in discussions with the Department of Veterans Affairs on the path that the funding would travel. There are some procurement eccentricities that we would need to work out. And that's something we are currently working on.
Great. Thank you for that, Senator.
And
Are there any questions for Senator Nagle from the committee? Can you speak just a bit on what you think the role of the legislature ought to be in this? And if we were to do this long term, what would be your suggestion for us to consider?
it would just, I think this is a good model. We're partnering with an outside establishment that can work faster, meaning they can write a check in one day, where the legislature or DAFs has to go through this whole procurement process and all of that. I think it gives it makes the organization who's administering any program a lot more nimble. And we would just provide funding.
Thank you. Appreciate you being here today, sir.
Thanks. I'm sorry I was late. I thought we would be going much later.
It's okay. It's all good. We are very flexible in this committee. And so I knew that when you showed up, you would be able to testify. And we did hear, obviously, from Preble Street, who answered some specific questions and will bring more data to the work session for us that we have requested so far. Are there no more questions for Senator Nagle? Seeing none. Anyone else present who wishes to testify in favor of LD 2135? Good morning.
Good morning. Senator Hickman, Representative Cepica, distinguished members of the Veterans and Legal Affairs Committee. My name is David Patch, and I am the president of Maine Veterans in Need, a veteran-led, all-volunteer, nonprofit organization whose mission is to assist veterans and their dependents who are in need, advocating for those in active crisis emergencies, preventing homelessness, helping those that are homeless transition into stable housing, and prevent veteran suicide. I appreciate the opportunity to testify today in strong support of LD 2135. I want to be clear from the outset, this bill is not theoretical to me. This funding is not abstract. The problem it addresses is something I see every week, often every day across Maine. As president of Maine Veterans in Need, I work directly with homeless veterans, men and women who served our country and are now sleeping in their cars, living in tents in the woods, couch surfing, or cycling through emergency shelters. Some are elderly, some are disabled, some are still working, but can't keep up with Maine's housing cost. Many are reluctant to ask for help at all. Veteran homelessness in Maine has improved over time, but it still has not been solved. Recent point-in-time counts continue to identify well over 100 veterans experience homelessness stateside in a single night. And those numbers are not always capturing the veterans still living in vehicles, encampments, or temporarily doubled up, whom my organization regularly encounters. In practice, the need is larger and more persistent than the official count suggests. At the same time, Maine faces one of the tightest housing markets in the country. Rents continue to rise faster than fixed incomes, disability compensation, or entry-level wages. Even veterans who qualify for federal housing assistance often struggle to find a landlord willing to accept them or to secure a unit before crisis turns into homelessness. This is where Pebble Street work is essential. Pebble Street is not just a service provider, it's a keystone organization in Maine's veterans homelessness response system. Their veteran housing staff conducts outreach, navigate complex systems, recruit landlords, and provide the practical supports that actually move veterans from homelessness into housing. Importantly, I can say from my direct experience that the grant funding referenced by LD 2135 has worked. Maine Veterans in Need has personally witnessed the positive impact of Pebble Street's prior funding used by the veteran housing efforts. Because of the funding, veterans were able to secure apartments that otherwise would not have been available to them. Landlords were willing to take a chance on veterans with limited income or prior housing instability. Housing placements happen faster, reducing time spent in shelters, in vehicles and encampments. Veterans stabilized before their situations deteriorated into mental or medical emergencies. This is not just compassionate, it's cost effective. Every veteran who is housed reduces the burden on emergency rooms, law enforcement, shelters, and crisis services. Housing first and housing stabilization approaches consistent cost far less than allowing homelessness to persist. Maine Veterans in Need does not replace Pebble Street's work. We support and strengthen. Maine Veterans in Need provides peer-based veteran encouragement, engagement, emergency stabilization, benefits navigation, coordinated access across local and regional partners. Veterans often relate more easily to veterans they trust, veterans, and that trust can be key that opens the doors to housing and services. When Maine Veterans in Need and Pebble Street work together, outcomes improve. LD 2135 recognizes an essential reality. Ending veteran homelessness requires coordinated systems, not isolated efforts. The $90,000 appropriation is modest in scale, but high in impact. It helps replace lost grant funding so that proven strategies, landlord incentives, housing search support, and rapid stabilization do not disappear at a time when housing market is already stacked against low-income veterans. I want to emphasize something important. The veterans we serve are not asking for luxury. They're asking for safety, dignity, and stability. A door that locks, a place to sleep, a chance to rebuild. LD 2135 helps make this happen. As someone who has sat with veterans in the cars in the winter, walked through encampments in the woods, and helped people navigate the system one step at a time, I can say this with confidence. Pebble Street's work saves lives, and this funding helps keeps that work going. On behalf of Maine Veterans in Need and on behalf of the veterans we serve, I respectfully urge the committee to support LD 2135. Thank you for your time, your service, your commitment to Maine veterans, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Patch, for presenting your testimony. I've learned a bit. Are there any questions from the committee? Mr. Patch, do you think that the $90,000 appropriation, though modest and high in impact, is enough?
It's never enough. That has been previously mentioned. There are other organizations that are also out there supporting veterans. Not knowing I guess it's hard for me to answer the question because I'm not that close to how Pebble Street works. But I know that every bit of funding that we can possibly get is going to benefit the veterans in the long run.
Where is your organization located?
Veteran, we have an office in Brunswick in the at the on the old base. And it's provided at no cost. It was generously donated as part of the building. The office my office is within the Midcoast Veteran Council Resource Center. But frankly, my office is my car because I pretty much cover the state. And Maine Veterans in Need that operates, we're all volunteers. We don't operate on any government money. We only work on donations. So we kind of fill a gap where government resources always require some degree of processing, some degree of time. We work closely with Preble Street, so we are able to provide the immediate need when it needs to happen, and then work with Preble Street downstream and connect with the other resources. The state provides the Veteran Emergency Financial Assistance Program. So that helps us navigate through some of the needs. Obviously, I'm going to get on my soapbox. So most of these veterans are living on the margin. They have a fixed income, especially those that are disabled and can't work. The prices of things are going up all the time, as we already know. Food insecurity is going to get worse as the SNAP requirements are starting to will start getting implemented. So the question is how do we keep these veterans from continuing to be in a homeless or almost homeless situation? They're living on the margin as it is. One thing happens, like a car breaks down, they can't go to work, it compounds the problem. Many of them want to work, but can't because of their physical or mental problems. We're dealing with this every day. And it's
I just want to get clarity. Are you saying to this committee that the change in SNAP, that veterans are not exempted from that at all? As far as you are aware, veterans will still have to comply with the new.
To my knowledge, that's correct. We just had a town hall meeting on SNAP in Boothbay the other day. And there was no, that I'm aware of, and I could absolutely be wrong because I'm not that familiar with it, that the veterans are just as exposed to it. And it's obviously the state's not going to be able to provide to make up the difference that the federal government is now shifting the responsibility. According to the Speaker of the House that was there, that it's not likely that the funds are going to be there the way they were. We do know that there's going to be a work requirement, but the good news is that the work requirement includes volunteerism, and that's going to help organizations like mine. But I'm not sure I answered your question.
You did. I appreciate that very much. Chair recognizes Representative Frost, who also has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks so much for being here. I was just curious, how many volunteers are in your organization? And are they all veterans? And I had one other question, but I can follow up.
So we've got 5 volunteers, but we're part of a network of those that are caseworkers in the various other organizations. And so we all work together as a team. And I have my favorite bubble chart, which has all these organizations around there that aren't working in silos, and we're connecting them all together. So to say that Maine Veterans in Need and our few people are out there doing it, really, we're networking with all the other folks that are funded to do the work they do. And I would say over the last 5 years since Maine Veterans in Need was established, this network is getting effective. And I think we're able to leverage the resources that we all have pretty effectively.
And the 5 of you, are you all veterans?
We're all veterans.
Oh.
I'm retired military. Not that it matters, but I had 3 tours of Vietnam, and this is helping me get back to my brothers and sisters of service. I get emotional a little bit, but.
You have any other questions, Representative?
If I could do a follow-up, that would be
You
great.
may.
So, so when you travel the state, so like, would your gasoline be paid for by?
I'm fortunate to be retired from the military and I have an income, and I'm retired from business and I have an income. I wouldn't take a penny.
Thank you very much for everything you do.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Patch? Seeing none, we thank you for your service and for being here today. Is anyone else present who wishes to testify in favor of LD 2135? Anyone online? Seeing none, anyone present who wishes to testify in opposition to LD 2135? Seeing none, anyone present who wishes to testify neither for nor against LD 2135? Welcome back, Director.
Thank you. What Dave didn't tell you is he's going to be our catcher on the Maine Bureau of Veteran Services softball team. We're playing a softball game for fundraising. That's how they get all their money. So that'll happen on Valentine's Day. Be sure to ask him about that. Good morning, Senator Hickman and Representative Topeka, and distinguished members of the Joint Standing Committee on Veterans and Legal Affairs. I'm David Richmond, the Director of the Maine Bureau of Veteran Services. I'm here today to testify neither for nor against LD 2135, an act to provide funding to keep Maine veterans housed. LD 2135 proposes a one-time general fund appropriation to support housing stabilization activities for veterans through Preble Street, including landlord incentives, outreach, and the resolution of past rental debts. The intent of the bill aligns with ongoing statewide and federal efforts to reduce veteran homelessness and maintain access to permanent supportive housing. The Maine Bureau of Veteran Services recognizes and values the important work that Preble Street performs in serving homeless veterans in our state. Their organization is a key partner within the Maine's broader continuum of care and has contributed meaningfully to the efforts to stabilize housing for vulnerable veteran populations. However, MBVS would like to share several considerations related to the proposed funding structure. As a state agency, any disbursement of general fund monies, even on a one-time basis, would be subject to state procurement statutes, fiscal policies, and oversight requirements. This would necessitate the establishment of rules, monitoring mechanisms, and accountability structures to ensure appropriate use of the state funds. These requirements may limit the flexibility intended by the proposal, particularly for funding designed to incentivize landlords and to respond quickly to housing-related needs. Additionally, while Preble Street is an important partner, it represents one organization within a larger network of service providers working to address veteran homelessness across Maine. Many of these organizations were similarly impacted by the loss of federal funding. Directing state funds to a single provider may raise equity considerations when other organizations are performing comparable work in different regions of the state. The Maine Bureau of Veteran Services remains committed to working collaboratively with the legislature, state agencies, and community partners to explore solutions that are equitable, fiscally responsible, and aligned with state procurement requirements, while continuing to support efforts to prevent and reduce veteran homelessness. Thank you for your consideration, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for being here, Director. Are there any questions from the committee? Chair recognizes Representative Frost.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I guess I'm just a little surprised because I understand there are other organizations trying to do impactful work, but it would seem that any funding that could go to even just one would be better than nothing. So I guess I'm surprised by that.
Thank you for the question, Representative. Like I mentioned, Preble Street is a key partner in the Homeless Veteran Action Committee. We work with them daily. Our case workers on our Homeless Veteran Action team are in day-to-day contact with Dave Patch, with Dan Hodgkins behind me, and several other partners. They're all doing excellent work. and they're all an integrated team. And as a state agency, to distribute money to the one organization without any type of competitive process would be a little bit problematic. I did also want to mention that I think Senator Nagel alluded to the fact that we had a discussion about my other concern about the flexibility of the funding and using general funds for incentives and settling bad debt for the landlords. I proposed other possibilities that I'm looking forward to getting into in the work session to see if there's another way to identify funding that's not derived from the general fund and getting it to an agency such as Maine Housing that could potentially issue a grant without restraints that our state agency may have on using general fund money.
Thank you for that. Last session, I think it was, or was it last legislature? We passed legislation, I think it was presented by the department, that would create a little more flexibility in one of the homelessness funds that you have. Can you remind me what that was and whether or not any of that money can be used for something like this?
Thank you for the question, Senator. Yes, last session, the legislature gave us additional flexibility in using another one of our accounts, our Veterans Transitional Housing Fund, that was underutilized. It was originally designed to reimburse transitional housing facilities that didn't receive federal funding with a state per diem. And it was underutilized because virtually all of the founding members of that initiative have gone out of business, except for one. One still remains here in Augusta. But the funding that was appropriated was underutilized. So we asked for some additional flexibility so that we could use it more like our Veterans Emergency Financial Assistance Program.
Okay.
So that gives us an additional pot of money to leverage for veterans who are in a housing emergency, as well as veterans who experience any other type of emergency in addition to housing. And yes, as both Dan and David mentioned, we use VFAP and the transitional funding daily to help resolve emergencies, financial emergencies of veterans who are at risk of becoming homeless or who are homeless.
And so, as I read the testimony from the gentleman from Preble Street, it just sounded as if, and the gentleman, Mr. Patrick, just spoke, it sounds like all of this is very similar. And I'm just wondering if there is a way to allow you to use some of those funds for this purpose, even for this agency, without going through the entire procurement process.
So to answer your question, which is a really hard question to answer, I'll give you an example that I just went through yesterday. And this probably happens 3 or 4 times a week, where a veteran is in a situation, an emergency situation regarding their housing, and it falls between the lines that we established in rulemaking for VFAP, Veterans Emergency Financial Assistance Program, and the transitional housing money. And it falls within the lines because it's more money than we can give. We can give as our between VFAP and the transitional money, we can issue relief of $2,250 per year per veteran who gets in a pickle. And that's not enough sometimes to resolve the unique situations that we encounter. So, and I'm sure that Dan and David both know who I'll talk about, and I won't identify who they are, but they needed somewhere around $6,000. And so working in partnership with all the other agencies, Maine Veterans in Need, formerly FedCap, now Easter Seals, who is our vendor for VFAP, and others, we cobbled together enough money to keep that veteran in housing. And because we went through rulemaking and we can't just reduce the amount of debt this veteran has unless it results in them staying in their housing, we have to have a plan that keeps them in their housing. We can't just give 2250 to the landlord to reduce their, to reduce the debt if it's still going to result in the veteran being evicted. So we have to have a plan that keeps them in housing. So we cobbled together a plan that has a certain amount up front, in this case, right around $4,000 with all the agencies kicking in, including VFAP, and a plan, a path to victory for that veteran. They're going to take another person into their housing unit who will be able to help with the rent. They're going to increase their income, in this way. There's a plan to victory. So to answer your question, yes, we can use that money. And we try to be as flexible as possible. And when it falls within the cracks, it's a waiver process that goes right to my desk. And we do try to be as flexible as we can. My specific concern is we can't issue a $1,500 check to a landlord just to keep the room open.
Mhm.
That's not paying rent. That's not doing anything else except providing a slot for that veteran to be housed.
And that is because of the current rules.
That is true.
And the rules can be updated to increase the amount that you could.
That could happen. And I think from where I stand, I would leave that to the legislature to determine what is the appropriate use of the general fund. And I think the VFAP is very targeted. We can cover debt if it results in them staying in housing. We can replace a boiler that broke
Mhm.
and in a weekend coming up when it's going to be below zero. We can do things like that because we wrote it into our rules. But where it gets a little bit hazy is if we're using it to cover bad debt that doesn't necessarily result in remaining in housing, and for incentive payments that aren't related to rent. Those were my two concerns,
Mhm.
and I think they can be overcome. It's just the question that I think will fall to the legislature is what is the appropriate use
Yeah.
of the general funding?
Right, and the legislature can direct you to do anything. I just wanted to know what utopia would be needed for us to even consider directing you to change your rules to cover some of these blurred lines that you currently are interpreting restrict you from helping a veteran stay housed
Mhm.
in any way or any which way. What is that fund at now? And is there an ongoing appropriation to it from the legislature? And if so, what is the amount?
Yes.
I need this for the work session.
I will have you the exact amount for you for the work session, but for VFAP, we have an annual appropriation of $250,000.
Okay,
Currently, we only have one vendor that receives that. We can have as many as 2 or 3. It doesn't. But the other fund that you were talking about that the legislature amended so that we have more flexibility in using it, the transitional housing fund, that is annually appropriated at $100,000. It's non-lapsing, so it continues to build. Like I said, it was underutilized. So we've got more than $100,000 in there, closer to $300,000 in there. But I'll bring you the exact number at the work session.
and you have rulemaking around using that fund as well?
We have we do have rulemaking authority for that fund.
And have you promulgated any rules for that fund?
We don't have a new rule for that yet, Senator.
Any other question for the director? You keep focusing on the general fund in your testimony and today as well. And do either of the funds as they are set up allow for you to receive private funds or other public funds that are not from the general fund?
Yes, Senator. They can, at least one of them, and probably both, can receive private donation.
And could a private donation to either one of these funds, according to how you administer them, be earmarked to do these specific things that are laid out in the testimony in front of us?
If we had the authority to, yes, we could write rules to allow us to issue payments like $1,500 incentive payments to landlords. And if the intent of the legislature was that we do that very thing, then yes, we could do that.
I appreciate this information. I have an idea. I won't say it until the work session, but I just wanted to get your thoughts on how these funds are funded and if they can be earmarked for particular expenses that don't necessarily have to go through the procurement process. Because I'm hearing that that's the barrier for the most part. Thank you. I see no further questions from the committee. We look forward to working with you on this and the bill sponsor and the advocates before and during the work session. Thank you, sir.
Thank
Is there
you.
anyone else present who wishes to testify neither for nor against LD 2135? Seeing none, the chair will, are there any information requests for our analysts for the work session? In addition to what the chair has requested of the department? Seeing none, chair closes the public hearing on LD 2135. Okay. And with that, Madam Clerk, are we ready? Up there, thank you. Chair opens the public hearing on LD 2080. An act to protect consumers by prohibiting the use of credit cards in sports wagering presented by our very own Representative Mallard of Bickford.
I'll sign in briefly and apologies for not being here earlier today. I had responsibilities outside the building to attend to.
Don't worry.
Okay. All right. And I, of course, will need to leave after this public hearing. Senator Hickman, Representative Topeka, and honorable colleagues with the Joint Standing Committee on Veterans and Legal Affairs. My name is Mark Mallon, and I am proud to represent House District 133, which is part of the great city of Biddeford. I'm here today to introduce LD 2080, an act to protect consumers by prohibiting the use of credit cards in sports wagering. Like many of the activities we oversee in this committee, gambling is one which requires a constant balancing act. On the one hand, sports wagering and our brick and mortar casinos have brought significant revenue into our state and provided jobs which boost local economies. On the other hand, rates of gambling addiction are on the rise in Maine as they are nationally, and the addictive nature of modern mobile devices increases gaming participants' risk of sliding into dangerous patterns. It's a concern we must take seriously with sports wagering and the new iGaming law, which will take effect later this year. It's fair to say that these concerns are why supporting the iGaming bill, which I did, was the most difficult vote I have cast so far in my tenure as a legislator. I supported that bill not because I like online gambling, but one, to place regulations on activity already occurring, and two, to have Maine and particularly the Wabanaki nations benefit from its revenue. While sports wagering continues to grow and as iGaming comes online, it is appropriate for the legislature to consider guardrails which can protect consumers from falling into dangerous habits and into debt. That is why the National Council of Legal Gambling States recommends prohibiting the use of credit cards for placing online bets. Studies confirm that allowing credit cards for online gambling and sports betting leads to increased wagering, higher rates of gambling addiction, and significant financial risk as credit cards provide easy access to debt. It makes sense. If you use a debit card or link the gaming app to your bank account, you still run the risk of wiping out your account, but at least there's a natural limit. With credit cards, the risk is exponentially larger. It's important to note that the most widely used sports wagering app in the state, DraftKings, currently does not allow the use of credit cards. I tested this myself and I give them credit for the responsible business practice. But we should not have to rely on corporate practices to protect Maine consumers. There is a role for state regulation. LD 2080 specifies the methods of payment that may be used to make a sports wager and prohibits the use of a credit card to pay for a sports wager. The draft before you only applies to sports wagering because the disposition of iGaming was unclear at the time of cloture. I do strongly, however, recommend that the committee amend this bill to apply its provisions to the new iGaming statute. I consulted with our analysts, and after a quick review, we were able to identify some changes which would need to be made to 8 MRSA Chapter 39, which is the regulation of internet gaming statute that is due to come online after this session ends. I won't read the technical legalistic language, but that will give Ms. Olson a basis to present to us in a work session. And I'll work with our analysts to develop a sponsors amendment to make these changes in advance of the work sessions so that we can have a comprehensive document to work off of. In closing, I believe this is a reasonable regulation which will add a modest guardrail to protect consumers while not harming the financial and economic benefits which have come from sports wagering and will come from iGaming. Maine would not be alone. Several other states, including Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Illinois, also prohibit the use of credit cards for placing gambling wagers. It just makes sense. I look forward to our continued work on this bill, and I ask for your support, and I'm happy to attempt at least to address any questions you have.
Thank you, Representative. Are there any questions from the committee? Representative Mallon at this time. Chair recognizes Representative Boyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Mallon. Off the top, do you know if casinos we have statute regarding casinos and credit card versus debit cards?
You know what? I'm not 100% sure on that. We can certainly ask their folks, and I'm willing to entertain possibilities.
Thank you. Any other questions for the bill sponsor from the committee? Seeing none.
No.
I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand. The chair's in there. The chair recognizes Representative Hyde.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Allen. I just had a question. Are you, and here's is probably going to come up in the work session. Are you for prohibiting the use of credit cards across the board or limiting the amount that they can use from their credit cards?
This bill would contemplate a prohibition on the use of credit for placing gambling wagers, essentially. So you could use a debit card that draws directly from your checking account, but not incur debt.
I understand that. My question was, is the credit card specifically, would you like to just prohibit credit cards completely or
Yes.
set a limit on the credit card use?
I would like to prohibit the use of credit cards and placing in other forms of credit for gambling completely.
Okay.
I'm happy to have further discussions about this and other things during work session though, and
Okay.
see what approaches might make the most sense. I'm never wedded to the original draft.
Okay, thanks.
Chair recognizes Representative Chapman. Chapman is all set. Any other question for the bill sponsor at this time? Seeing none. Thank you for presenting.
Thank you, folks.
the legislation. Is there anyone present who wishes to testify in favor of LD 2080? In favor? Good morning, Director.
Good morning.
You may proceed whenever you are ready, sir.
Okay. Senator Hickman, Representative Topeka, and distinguished members of the Veterans and Legal Affairs Committee. I am Milton Champion, Executive Director of the Gambling Control Unit within the Department of Public Safety, and I'm here today on behalf of the Department of Public Safety to testify in favor of LD 2080, which is an act to protect consumers by prohibiting the use of credit cards and sports wagering with amendments. This bill specifies the methods of payment that may be used to make a sports wager and prohibits the use of credit card to pay for a sports wager. Current statutes in all areas of gambling under the oversight of the Gambling Control Board and the unit are attached to my testimony today as reference to hopefully establish consistency throughout. In this bill, under subsection 1220, it describes methods of payments for wagers. Sports wagering accounts are established by rule under our Chapter 60 and are attached. Sports wagering accounts are required except through payment at a sports wagering facility for in-person wagering, which is B below. By rule in Chapter 60, A patron sports wagering account for mobile sports wagers may be funded using a patron's deposit account, a patron's deposit of cash or gaming chips at a facility lounge, promotional or bonus credits, winnings, or adjustments made by the operator with documented notification to the patron or any other means approved by the director. I think the addition of 1220 could create some confusion that is necessary as current sports wagering licensed suppliers of payment processing systems are in place to include, and these are all licensed operators or licensed businesses, to include but not limited to Pay Near Me, PayPal, PaySafe, Ingo Money, WorldPay, YourPay, and Pavilion Payments, making number one in this section not really necessary. Digital wallets, prepaid cards, gift cards would be difficult to regulate by a non-licensed entity. Therefore, we recommend this not be included as approved method as well and strike this section from the bill. I thank you for the opportunity to appear before the committee today. We'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Director. Are there any questions from the committee? Chair recognizes Representative Boyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Director. If you could answer my question about credit cards and casinos, that'd be great.
Yes, the way it reads, and I gave you a copy of that in with my testimony today, as far as the credit prohibiting in a casino, a slot machine operator, casino operator may not allow the use of a credit card or debit card by a person to play a slot machine or table game. That's the only part we have in that section or in that area. You would also note that in some of these sections, it says prohibit the extension of credit and not necessarily prohibit the use of a credit card. So one other thought I had too is you might want to make this a blanket prohibition and perhaps even put it in the unlawful activity statute and just say include all gambling, not to be able to use a credit card.
Chair recognizes Representative Chapman.
When you say all gambling, do you intend retails and Main State Lottery as well?
I don't regulate the lottery, so that would be something you'd have to go through with the lottery. But I think it could be worded in the unlawful activity statute to basically say, and you could carve it out to say casino, fantasy, charitable, sports wagering, and leave the lottery out if that's your position.
So according to this testimony, if I'm reading it correctly, current sports wagering license suppliers of payment processing systems can use PayPal?
Yes.
And PayPal can be drawn from a credit card?
Essentially.
I mean, it can.
Yes.
So how do you how do you enforce this currently?
It's very hard to. It's, I mean, it's realistically, it's almost impossible. We have to look at the operator. Can their systems pull where they draw money from or where money's deposited from? Probably more than.
I mean, I use PayPal and my credit card is attached to it. It used to be my bank account, but I switched so that I could challenge something that was drawn fraudulently, which is much easier to do with a credit card than with a debit card from my bank account. So the question remains, if it's hard to do, what's the prohibition for?
Well, this would give us the leverage to investigate those type of transactions. They would have to be made through PayPal, through cash. And then again, if you're putting funds into a PayPal account, they'd have to separate whether you're buying a chair or a living room suite versus you're using the funds for gambling.
And I'm just not,
So-
and I would have to get this answer for the work session from our analysts, but
Right.
I don't know that PayPal would even give a regulator that information unless it's a criminal investigation. I mean, I don't understand why PayPal would tell someone who asked that the money that I spent on any item came from my credit card versus my bank account.
Right.
I don't, that's almost like an invasion of privacy to some regard, but how do you envision, I mean, if it's difficult to enforce now, how will this bill improve or continue to exacerbate that difficulty?
I think that's something that I could reach out to the licensees.
Okay.
Because all these, the ones that I mentioned are all licensed with us, so I could certainly reach out to them and ask them for their position on the ability to not allow for credit card purchases or being able to fund an account through a credit card.
Thank you. Any other questions for the director at this time? Seeing none, appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else present who wishes to testify in favor of LD 2080? Seeing none, is anyone present who wishes to testify in opposition to LD 2080? Seeing none, anyone present who wishes to testify neither for nor against LD 2080? Seeing none, are there any questions for our analysts for the work session? Other than the one I just alluded to, which also sounds like the department will look into that as well. Representative Boyd?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A matrix with different states and how they regulate it would be helpful.
Okay. Any other information requests? Chair recognizes Representative Hines.
Yeah, and then is there any other activity in the state of Maine that is also prohibited from the use of credit cards?
Any other activity, just period?
Can I go buy as much alcohol as I want on my credit card? Can I go use my credit card for anything, everything else in the state except for wagering?
Okay.
Is there any other prohibited activity in the state for when it comes to credit cards?
Okay. I think the question was clear. Any other questions for our analysts for the work session? Seeing none, the chair will close the public hearing on LD 2080. And we are making excellent time. We have two more pieces of legislation to have a public hearing. And with that, the committee will be at ease for a few minutes while we take a brief break. Committee will be at ease for 5 to 10 minutes. Thank you all very much. We have two more to go. It will be LD 2095 followed by LD 2155.
We got a lot. Absolutely, it takes it very seriously. And I think a few extra things for his last position, follows up into on it. But still, value, that's not going to be entirely service.
Like, I've had this like a friend like this. I did reach out, I still want to like, reach out like that period where he's fire codes, but I just reach back out.
Yeah.
That's what. Attaching it.
Oh, right. It was our compromise. I still want to Portland. I really want to do this to all of us.
I think during the entire shift, we were able to have this all and be fine. Yeah. Like, shoot, I should have way better. Wonderful conferences.
Look at some great places. There's one place
Good, how about your lunch? Find enough to do?
Never ends, right? Every time you drop something off, it's more.
Ultimately.
They used to do.
Such a great time.
I did.
The committee will be in order. Welcome back to the Joint Standing Committee on Veterans and Legal Affairs. We are going to continue with our public hearings. We are almost there. With that, the chair opens the public hearing on LD 2095, an act to prohibit bulk purchasing of tickets in certain lottery games, presented by our very own Representative Sapika of Bangor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am presenting this bill on behalf of the department, and therefore I would like to defer the remainder of my time to Director Lucchini.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any questions?
The chair welcomes Director Lou Lucchini from Bablo to come forward and present the agency bill to us today. It's good morning. Good morning, Director.
Morning.
Thank you.
Right, good morning, Senator Hickman, Representative Supika, and members of the Veterans and Legal Affairs Committee. I'm Louis Lucchini, Director of the Bureau of Alcoholic Beverages and Lottery Operations, and I'm here to testify in support of LD 2095, an act to prohibit the bulk purchasing of lottery tickets in certain lottery games. We're thankful to Representative Supika for sponsoring this legislation on our behalf. So the Bureau has submitted this testimony in response to the rise of lottery bulk purchasing activities that have happened across the country and internationally in lotteries. And for a little bit of background, a lottery bulk purchaser is an organization or a syndicate that pools money to buy lottery tickets in extremely large quantities. They're groups that raise large sums of money. Their source of funding is unknown to lotteries. And they use game information from lotteries' websites. They supplement it with FOIA and FOA requests of state lotteries. When they determine there's a mathematical edge, they try to monopolize the lottery purchases in order to win the jackpot. So once they identify a lottery and a game is targeted, these bulk purchasing syndicates will often hire individuals, like a team of individuals, to travel the state. They attempt to partner with retail stores that sell lottery tickets. And they make deals basically for the retailer to print tickets virtually nonstop in order for the syndicate to basically buy out all the possible combinations of a lottery game. They've hit many, many states over the past couple of years. I think the biggest one was Texas, where one group was able to kind of buy out a Texas in-state draw game that paid over $90 million. And so based on the reports, you know, there was newspaper articles around that. The Texas has an in-state draw game with like 22 million combinations. They did the math and saw that if they they bought over 99% of those combinations, and then won the jackpot plus the supplemental prizes. The Texas legislature moved quickly to ban the practice, and Governor Abbott signed it, and it's further investigating kind of some of the activities. And that bulk purchasing group was based out of London and Malta potentially, so it's an international group. So bulk purchasers have operated here in Maine too. Last summer, or at least once that we're aware of, I think just once. Last summer, the Bureau began fielding calls from lottery retailers that certain individuals were walking into their stores and offering to wire large sums of money if they'd be willing to basically let them use their machine just to print nonstop tickets. Sometimes they told our retailers that they were investors, sometimes professional gamblers. Sometimes they said they were part of one of these bulk purchasing groups. At least one retailer said they walked in with like a duffel bag of cash. So we got tons of calls because mostly in the Portland area where they were trying to operate, from retailers. And, you know, we told them this wasn't illegal. We didn't have the authority really to act on it, but we certainly urged caution because, you know, if a retailer prints a huge amount of tickets and the person who says they're going to give them money doesn't give them money, that's, you know, huge financial risk. So we certainly urged caution, but said it wasn't breaking the law to operate in conjunction with them. So after finding some retailer partners, that group aggressively started purchasing large amounts of our $30 progressive jackpot fast play ticket, and they eventually won the jackpot of a little over 1.8 million. And as I said, we didn't have the authority to intervene. So several states, Texas, Arizona, Illinois, New York, Vermont, or sorry, Virginia, they've all started to take action to prohibit these activities. Some have to do it through statute like us. That's why we're here with this bill. Some of their lottery commissions have sufficient rulemaking authority, so they can do it on their own without bills. And then some administratively can just say, we're putting in a cap on the amount of tickets that you can sell to retailers. So because we need the statutory authority, that's why we brought this bill forward. So the main points of this bill tries to do, we propose to define and prohibit bulk purchasing. And that includes, like, if you have a team of people buying in concert, we kind of took that language from Arizona. We allow the lottery to refuse payment, prize payment to a bulk purchasing organization. We prohibit retailers from knowingly partnering with a bulk purchaser. And we give the State Liquor and Lottery Commission broader rulemaking authority. That way they can, around bulk purchasing, so that they can further refine the rules and be responsive and nimble as these strategies change over time. Should the legislature choose to move forward, we'd respectfully request to add an emergency preamble so that we can stop this soon before we get hit again. We really want to get out in front of this. So yeah, in closing, we feel this prohibition would protect Maine consumers, preserve public trust in the lottery, ensure that the lottery operates as was originally intended. It's really about protecting the lottery player for us. So thank you for your consideration. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Director Lucchini. Is there currently, because I know this, the whole statute, and I'll read the whole statute later, but is there an appeals process for suspension and revocation
Of a,
of a lottery retailer?
yeah, yeah, I can get that information for you. Yeah.
And by section 7, is that where you are adding that particular provision to your rulemaking authority?
Section 7, that
Or was
adds,
it a different
that's the
section?
retailer prohibition.
Yep.
Section 3 and section 4 are the provisions that add rulemaking authority to the commission. So that's both the quantity of tickets and the bulk purchase of tickets.
Okay.
Yep. And section 8 is just the general prohibition language.
And these are routine technical rules?
Yes, yes. And we went with the threshold of $100,000. But states are all over the place with the limit, and we're not like solid on that. We're happy to flex to wherever people think is appropriate.
Chair recognized members of the board. Thank you, Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Director. In the case in Maine, did they in fact FOA or FOIA the game information from Maine?
I don't believe they did on this game before they came in. We have been forwarded by them before. But for this game, I don't believe they did. They just determined it from the information that we provide on our website, you know, just publicly. So I don't think they asked for it on this one.
And believe we passed some stuff about confidentiality. So was that check you cut for that winner? Did that fall under that confidentiality?
Technically not, because this was a tri-state game. The tri-state lottery is subject to its own compact of the three states, Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. So winners of those games aren't, the confidentiality passed last session don't apply to those. They apply to Maine state lottery games.
So it says that this doesn't apply to tri-state lotto.
Yeah, so we can't
So
write.
this wouldn't have stopped the example you're giving us?
Exactly, yeah. So we can't stop, or we can't unilaterally change the tri-state compact. We have to do it in conjunction with all three states. But this would stop them from targeting a Maine lottery game. What our plan is to do is see what the legislature's thoughts are on it, and then go to the Tri-State Lottery Commission and potentially modify through rulemaking how tri-state games get regulated.
But you haven't reached out to those folks yet on this issue?
They're all aware of it, but we haven't, and we've had informal talks, but we wanted to see what the legislature thought first.
Thank you.
Can a person use credit card to purchase lottery tickets?
What's that?
Can a person use a credit card to purchase lottery tickets?
Yes, yeah, we don't dictate how our retailers sell tickets.
Thank you. Any other questions for the director at this time? Thank you.
Yep.
We'll see you at the work session.
Yeah.
Is there anyone else present who wishes to testify in favor of LD 2095? Seeing none. Is there anyone present who wishes to testify in opposition to LD 2095? Seeing none, is there anyone present who wishes to testify neither for nor against LD 2095? Seeing none, are there any questions for our analysts for the work session? Chair closes the public hearing on LD 2095. And we have arrived at the main event, as it were. The chair will open the public hearing on LD 2155, an act to clarify certain laws governing licenses for the sale of liquor by manufacturers, presented by Senator Grahowski of Hancock. Good morning.
Good morning.
We moved right along. Here we
I
are.
appreciate that. I did have time to catch my breath though on my traverse from the tax committee. Senator Hickman, Representative Supika, and distinguished members of the Veterans and Legal Affairs Committee. My name is Nicole Grahowski, and I am honored to represent the 22 communities of Senate District 7. Thank you for the opportunity to present LD 2155, an act to clarify certain laws governing licenses for the sale of liquor by manufacturers. This bill amends Title 28A, Section 1355A, to further clarify the provisions of LD 1456, which was a Brewers Guild initiative that passed out of this committee and the legislature last year. This bill in front of you would ensure that a local small business owner who owns a brewery is not forced to sell other non-brewery businesses that are owned by that same business owner. Previously to the passage of LD 1456, an owner of an on-premises retail liquor license held by a manufacturer, i.e. a brew pub, could have an unlimited number of such licenses with no production volume requirements. LD 1456 curtailed this to just 3 licenses if liquor is being manufactured in one of the 3 locations, or 6 if the liquor is manufactured in 2 of the 6 locations at a volume of over 1,000 barrels per year. This well-intentioned law separates our Maine-based breweries from competitors that don't brew much beer, but benefit from calling themselves brew pubs when really they are restaurants. However, I represent a brewer and a restaurateur who has more licenses than are allowed under the new law. One location brews beer, and the others are restaurants that are not advertised as brew pubs, where he does sell the beer he brews along with beer from many other producers. My constituent is concerned that this law that was passed was not intended to force him to sell multiple locations, but that is the effect. He has been working with Bablo to delay compliance actions while this bill is in the legislature. The goal of this bill is to amend the new law so that brew pub licenses are still limited, but also so he can maintain his current business structure. The bill does this in two ways. First, it increases the number of retail liquor licenses that a person with a majority ownership interest and a manufacturing licensee may hold from 6 to 12. And second, it specifies that licenses issued on or before May 23rd, 2025, which is the effective date of LD 1456, would be exempt from the new restrictions on ownership interests, thus grandfathering existing businesses who are operating legally at that time. Finally, the bill in front of you has an emergency preamble because LD 1456 made a significant change to the license structure without any time built in for licensees to comply. My constituent, and I think some other business owners in the state, now need to quickly sell or close breweries and or restaurants in order to come in compliance with the law. Selling is not necessarily a fast endeavor, and closing would have detrimental effects on all of the people employed at the establishment with unfortunate downstream economic effects. Thus, it is my hope that your committee will support a solution in the near term. Thank you for your time and consideration of the bill and my testimony. I'd be happy to answer any questions the committee may have, and I will note that my affected constituent is here and poised to answer any more detailed questions you might have about the license structure and the businesses that are affected by the law change.
Thank you, Senator, for being here today and presenting your legislation. Are there any questions from the committee for Senator Grohowski? Seeing none.
Okay, thank you very much.
Taking testimony from the public on LD 2155. If you are here to testify in favor of LD 2155, you may step forward to the mic. If you are online and you wish to testify in favor of LD 2155, just raise your virtual hand and leave it raised until such time as we take online testimony, which will follow in-person testimony on this bill. Good morning.
Good morning still, yes.
Yes, this morning. You may proceed whenever you are ready, sir.
Thank you. Senator
I have
Hickman,
not ran a 3-minute clock all day, but because this public hearing has a lot of people signed up, I'm going to run the 3-minute
I'm going to
clock.
try. I'm
And,
going to try. Senator Hickman, I
Right
might
there.
speak fast. So, Representative Supika and members of the Veterans and Legal Affairs Committee. My name is Michael Boland. I am a year-round resident of Bar Harbor. Over the course of more than 4 decades, I have owned and operated multiple restaurants in that area and other areas of the state as well, including Portland and Bangor, Little Cranberry Island, Northeast Harbor. Several of these restaurants operate year-round, and I'd like to think greatly add to the vibrancy and the economic activity of the communities they are in. 4 years ago, I also acquired and reopened Sunday River Brewing Company in Oxford County, along with an old Victorian building in the town of Bethel, which I renovated and reopened as a bed and breakfast and restaurant, now called the Elizabeth in downtown Bethel. These businesses, along with the others, employ a mix of year-round and seasonal Maine workers and represent long-term investments made in Maine and reliance on Maine's licensing laws and the consistency of those laws. For instance, when I bought the brewery, it was legal to have that many restaurants. Now it is no longer. I appreciate Senator Grohowski bringing forward LD 2155, and I'm pleased to testify today in support of it. I'm here for a very simple reason. The law that took effect on May 23rd, 2025 created immediate and serious harm for operators like me, and I'm not alone, who had already built lawful, successful businesses. Through no action of our own, we were suddenly placed in violation of the law and faced the prospect of having to close operating businesses that employ Maine people and serve Maine communities. Under the current law recently passed, a person who owns a brewery and holds a majority interest in on-premise retail licenses, that is restaurants, is limited to 3 such licenses, as the Senator had said, including the brewery itself, if it's a restaurant. In my case, that means Sunday River is 1, and I have 2 others. Well, what happens to the other 8? I close them, I do whatever. They're currently and suddenly at risk. One of those restaurants, an example, is Havana in Bar Harbor. It's been part of the community for almost 30 years. We employ several year-round staff and have an annual payroll approaching $1 million. It is exactly the kind of stable, locally rooted business that Maine regulators should support that are consequence of the legislation last session may force liquidation. Again, as the senator indicated, LD 2155 fixes this problem in two important ways. The first is simply grandfathering existing licenses that were there at the time of the passing of the legislation, May 23rd, 2025. The bill makes clear that those licenses are exempt from the ownership cap, so businesses are not punished retroactively for investments they made legally and in good faith. I appreciate the emergency preamble that is included in the bill, which underscores that the current law has already put some operators, including myself, in violation and may force them to, again, sell or close their business if not corrected. The Craft Beer Guild, the opponents of the current proposed legislation, call these carve-outs. These aren't carve-outs. This is a grandfather clause. Carve-out something very different. Second, and equally crucial, the bill raises the cap on future on-premise retail licenses from 3 to 12 for people who hold a majority interest in manufacturing licenses. Of course, there's no cap on restaurants that don't happen to own a brewery. I want to be candid on this point. I believe any numerical cap on restaurants based solely on the fact that I happen to own a brewery is just not how we do it in America. It's not how we think of business growth or positive
Mr. Boland, I
economic development.
apologize. The 3 minutes is up, but if you give us time for questions, I'm sure we will have
Okay.
questions for you.
All
Thank
right,
you.
all right. That's it. I got a lot more, but yeah, I'm happy to take questions.
Chair recognizes Representative Speaker with questions.
Thank you, sir. Could you continue your testimony and tell us how LD 2155 is a compromise, please, sir?
Well, that's right. Yep. I mean, I'm against any limit, but however, as all things in life, there's compromises. And so I believe this is a compromise, is 12. I don't think we should be saying, you know, what if you said to Amados back in the turn of the century, you can only have one sub shop, right? No, we wouldn't have done that. I don't think we should be saying we should have 3. But again, in the spirit of compromise, this puts it at 12. I think that we should revisit that at some point, but this will help a lot of businesses right now. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you. Are there any other questions from the committee? Chair recognizes Representative Speaker.
Oh, go.
Did you have a question? Chair recognizes Representative Chapman first. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I guess, and maybe this question isn't for you, but if you hit on something I was thinking. So if you own a brewery, you can only have X number of on-premise licenses. If you do not own a brewery and you're just a pizza sub shop and you have a bar, you can have 20 bars, 20.
300, 3,000.
So this is based on the fact that it's a brewer. Is there a brewer in the license somewhere? Is there?
If you own a brewery,
Yeah.
the great fear is that I'm going to have 30 restaurants and only sell my beer. The great irony is some of the best-selling beers at my restaurants over the years have been Allagash White, Maine Beer Company's Lunch, Arno Brewing Company's Tubular. I sell my own beers that I make, and there are chains of restaurants out there that only sell their beers. Let the marketplace decide. We don't do this through legislation.
I guess I'm just trying to clarify, is it a different, and Tubular is my favorite, by the way. Is it a different license if you're a brewer and you have an on-premise license than if you are a pizza shop and you have an on-premise license?
Yes and no. You have to get a small Maine brewer's license, and then you have to get the same type of on-premise alcoholic consumption license as the pizza shop does. You need 2 licenses at that brew pub.
So could your,
You may proceed.
thank you, Chair. So could your business have 3 or 6 on-premise licenses under the brewer, and the other 6 to 9 to 12 have it on just a regular on-premise license?
Correct. But at this point, with the current legislation, I can only have 3 on-premise licenses.
So maybe the compromise is that you could have more than one on-premise license, one brewer, one separate.
The proposal here is that I could have up to 12.
Okay.
One brewery, 12 licenses.
It just opens up the door to a lot more questions, I guess, during the work session. Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Are there any other questions from the committee? Chair recognizes Representative Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What do you think that the original reasons for the restrictions were?
I think that I don't want to disparage anyone, but I think these are big businesses at this point. At one point, the Maine craft beer industry was a small, scrappy, important part. Honestly, it's sad for me to be testifying. I was one of the first supporters of Allagash back in 1994. He would drive his beer up to me. I've been so impressed and proud as a fellow Mainer that these businesses have grown so big. These are not small, scrappy businesses anymore. They're $100 million businesses. Both Allagash and Maine Beer Company is approaching that, right? I think they should be ashamed of how they're using legislation to further their market share and to squash little competitors. I think that was the goal. They claimed that it wasn't. They claimed that it was to preserve the integrity of the small craft beer industry in Maine. Again, I sell their beers. I recently looked at a building in Ellsworth 3 days ago that I wanted to buy. Guess what would have been in tap at that restaurant? I couldn't buy it because of this current legislation. Arno Beer Company, Maine Beer Company, Allagash White. So I don't see how this helped Maine people, and it certainly didn't help a number of operators, not just myself. It hurt us. And so I don't know of any explanation other than that, let's use legislation to win market share.
Thank you for your candor. Are there any other questions for the testifier from the committee at this time? Seeing none.
Thank you.
Is anyone else present or online who wishes to testify in favor of LD 2155? If you are online and you wish to testify in favor of LD 2155, please raise your virtual hand and leave it raised until such time as the chair calls on you to provide testimony. You may proceed, Mr. Cloutier.
Senator Hickman, Representative Supika, distinguished members of the committee, pleasure to be in front of you this morning. My name is Nate Cloutier, here on behalf of two associations that I represent. The first is Hospitality Maine, which represents Maine's restaurant and lodging industry, as well as the Maine Tourism Association, which has been promoting and supporting tourism-related businesses for more than a century in the state. We're here to support LD 2155. I just want to make it abundantly clear what the current limitations are, because I think that's important. Somebody who has a single brewery in the state is only, if you have a brewery, you have to have a brewery license. The current law is that if you have one brewery, then you can only have 3 licenses total. So I can have 1 brewery and 2 restaurants on top of that. If I want to expand beyond that, SOL, you cannot do it. So the current limit is that you have 1 brewery, 3 licenses total, a cap of 6 licenses if you can have 2 brewery manufacturing sites. I want to explain how HM and MTA came to our position on this bill, because I think it's pretty important. So we've reviewed this through 2 lenses, retroactively and prospectively, and through 2 basic criteria: what is fair and what is reasonable. The most immediate concern is the retroactive impact. As you heard from Michael, people have made business decisions, people have made employment investments in their communities. This retroactive change in the law last year is telling existing restaurants, nationally recognized restaurants, that they would have to close their doors because they own a brewery. That is a very compelling, concerning piece of this legislation that it needs to be addressed. Applying something retroactively is a more concerning prospect in legislation, because it signals to current businesses and to potential investors that the state doesn't have stability in its licensing process. And that if I choose to make this investment today on the promise that X, Y, and Z will be there, the state won't deliver on that promise tomorrow. Both associations support the 3-tier system. We think that the distributors are an essential part of the process in making sure that we have a variety of beers that come to restaurants. I want to take some responsibility and ownership for not recognizing in the heat of last session the impact, the downstream consequences that LD 1465 would have on existing businesses. I'd like to implore the committee to ask Bablo for information on how many businesses have Chapter 43B manufacturing brew pub licenses and additional liquor licenses, on-premise retail liquor licenses that put them at or exceed that threshold. I have a feeling this is a pretty isolated group of folks that this hopefully can be addressed through legislation without unwinding the intent of what the Brewers Guild was promoting last session.
Mr. Cludier, your time has come to an end. We thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions? Chair recognizes Senator Timberlake.
Mr. Cludier, thank you for being here. I don't know if I should ask you or maybe Mr. Lucchini when he comes up, but so is it possible under the existing law that if you're a brewer, that you can sell to a distributor who can then just distribute to all the restaurants that you want? Because I believe that's under the current law. So, you know, if you're a brewer and you're gonna go that big, then, and you're gonna supply that many restaurants, you could distribute to a distributor who could then supply all of your restaurants with the same license that everybody else has. Is that not?
I believe that's the current process.
So there is a way for him to get his product. Because he can
For
put
who to
it through, he can put it through a distributor. I mean, that's the way we have to do it. We're allowed 3 tasting rooms. And then for our stores, we have to buy it through a distributor. I can't put it in my stores and sell it.
I see what you're saying. That I don't think the issue of breweries overcrowding their own taps is as dire as may be presented at this hearing. I think that you heard from Michael Bolin that he has Sunday River Brewing Company, and some of his best-selling beers are Maine craft beers that are on tap. And that variety is important because it responds to what the market wants. Honestly, this is a market decision, and it should be. I sympathize with Michael's position that I've had people approach me and say that there should be no cap, because why should the market put its finger or thumb on the scale of deciding what brews get access to certain restaurants or get equal access compared to others? Why not let the consumer decide and let the restaurant decide what it wants to offer?
Thank you.
And I'll just close with that question and say that if this committee chooses not to take any action, right now Bablo has been lenient to those that are out of violation of this law. If nothing changes, Bablo can revoke those licenses and force closures of these restaurants. So this is a serious issue that needs addressed.
Chair recognizes there's a lot of questions coming your way, sir. Chair recognizes Representative Boyer, followed by Representative Fairclough, followed by Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We hear a lot about the 3-tiered system. Could you tell us other parts of our law that one could argue undermine the 3-tiered system?
Could I get that for you for the work session, or you have a multiple choice answer?
The work session is fine. The chair recognizes Representative Fairclough.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and maybe we don't know, but do we currently know, or do you currently know how many businesses we're talking about that are in the shoes of similar to Mr. Bolin?
I don't, and that's why I had mentioned that I hope that the department would be able to find that information pretty easily, because I have a feeling that there is a pretty isolated group of folks.
Thank you. Representative Frost.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just, I guess my question is, the proponents of the bill, I guess, the current bill, were they thinking that, let's say for these people who are in this predicament, were they thinking that it would just be like, well, you should just sell your brewery and then you're legal? Is that, I'm trying to figure this whole thing out.
I don't know that this exact situation was contemplated by the proponents of the current law. I think that and I'll let the guild speak for themselves, but from some conversations I've heard that there's been some frustration that some brewers in Maine were only brewing their own beer and also had restaurants that they would not allow other taps to come into. That's a legitimate frustration. However, I don't think that it's a sky is falling type issue. The consequence is, I don't know if it was fully thought through that they would have to close these businesses as a result.
Close or sell, right? They could
Close or
sell the
sell, yep.
business. Okay.
And if you can find somebody that wants to buy a restaurant right now, that's a good thing.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Cloutier from the committee at this time? Seeing none, we look forward to your information for the work session that has been requested.
You will have it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else present who wishes to testify in favor of LD 2155? Is there anyone online? You may proceed by promoting. Is it Mr. Matthew Haskell? Yes, you may promote Mr. Haskell at this time. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Mr. Haskell, if you are online and you are wishing to testify, we are asking for you to accept the invitation to do so. Great. And you may turn on your microphone and your camera whenever you are ready.
Hi, how are you? Are you there now? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Well, I appreciate everybody in the room today for being here. I don't need too much time, but I think.
Please introduce yourself and tell us where you live and if you represent any entity, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, so my name is Matthew Haskell. I live in Blue Hill, Maine. I own Blaze Restaurant Group and Blaze Brewing Company as well as a few other businesses here in Maine. And I think that Michael and the gentleman from Maine Hospitality covered everything quite well. I am one of those other business owners who's kind of in a little bit of a pickle quite a big pickle because of this. The current law that was signed into emergency legislation. I had finally just kind of completed complying with the former law, which was quite a task in itself. But there were ways to continue to expand with the former law, and this new one just kind of sort of cuts that off and renders me sort of dead in my tracks in regards to expanding my company on the restaurant side. We have properties that can't be developed, properties that could be closed. We started Blaze Restaurant Group 16 years ago in Bar Harbor. It's our original location. We have locations in Blue Hill and Bangor. We have 2 restaurants, and then we have a restaurant in Orono. We brew beer in Biddeford. We own an orchard in Leamington, Maine called Dole's Orchard. And then we have a couple other properties that currently can't really be developed or touched that we either pay a rent on or we pay a mortgage on because we're currently handicapped by this law. It's frustrating. It's expensive. It's changed my business model. I've had discussions with the liquor enforcement folks who are great, by the way, about it. And they're there to enforce the law, and they do a good job of enforcing the law. But I think their internal sentiment as well is this was a little bit of a curveball thrown at some of us. I also do support other Maine breweries and have for a very, very long time at quite a high volume. And I still do. If you were to go into my Bangor restaurant, if you were to go into the Blue Hill restaurant or the Orono restaurant, you would see that there's other small Maine craft breweries on draft there, and there always has been. I used to own one of the original craft breweries in Maine, up in Orono back in the day, called the Bear Brew Pub. And then I kind of got out of the brewing business for quite some time and focused on the restaurants. And then in 2017, we started Blaze Brewing Company above our Camden restaurant. And at that time, I had to start complying with the state law of getting each location licensed as a brewery. That was quite a pain. It was expensive. It was burdensome. And then all of a sudden, this kind of curveball comes our way with limiting our ability to get more liquor licenses in the state. Again, just to reiterate everything the folks previous to me had said, it doesn't seem like this is the way that things should be dictated. And again, changing
Mr.
people's
Haskell?
business model on the fly
Mr.
like this.
Haskell, your
just doesn't-
time has
isn't
come
really-
to a
isn't really
close.
easy to feel. Okay.
If you can
Yep.
hear me, if you would like
Yep.
to wrap up, are you good?
Yep.
Thank you. Are
Yeah,
there any
I just
questions?
think changing business models on the fly is very, very difficult. And that's why I'm here today.
Thank you. Are there any questions? The chair recognizes Representative Chapman.
Thank you, Chair. How many locations do you have open and conducting business?
Well, because the orchard's closed right now, we have 5 locations open and conducting business.
How many of those are breweries?
Well, currently 2 are licensed as a brewery.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions from Mr. Haskell from the committee? Seeing none, we appreciate you being here today, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And Madam Clerk, you may make him a participant again. Are there any people, is there anyone else present or online who would testify in favor of LD 2155? In favor. Last call, seeing none. Is there anyone present who wishes to testify in opposition to LD 2155? We'll take in-person testimony first, and then we'll turn to online testimony in opposition. And if you are in opposition to the testimony and you are online, please raise your virtual hand and leave it raised until the chair promotes you via our clerk. Good afternoon, Ms. Knox.
Good afternoon. Senator Hickman, members of the committee, nice to see everyone again. My name is Kate Knox. I'm an attorney at Bernstein Scher. I'm testifying, I represent the Maine Brewers Guild. I'm testifying today for Maine Beer Company. Colleen Croteau, their COO, could not be here, and so I'm passing out her testimony. Although in the spirit of the legislative building, I think I'm going to pivot and answer some questions instead of reading her testimony, but I would ask you to do that. I will start by saying it was hard to listen to Mr. Boland and others describe the law you all passed last year the way he did. So I will attempt to clarify to the best of my ability my understanding of what's going on. To be very clear with you, the situation faced by Mr. Boland and Mr. Haskell is exactly the situation we wanted to prevent and why we asked you to pass the law last year. No matter what you feel about the 3-tier system, and I know there are a lot of feelings about it, we do have it. And what Mr. Boland and Mr. Haskell are doing is owning businesses in 2 of the 3 tiers. They're owning in a retail restaurant capacity, and they're owning in a manufacturing capacity. Excuse me, my mouth is dry. That is not allowed, and why Bablo is now looking to enforce against them. I can talk a little bit about the history of the law. What the brewers have is if you're a manufacturer and you manufacture beer, you are allowed to have a tasting room license, which allows you to have a version of a sort of, forgive me for not using the right terminology, but kind of restaurant lounge, right? Not a full restaurant. You're allowed that privilege as a manufacturer. What Mr. Boland is trying to do is get around the three-tier prohibition by turning his restaurants into brew pubs. And that is exactly what we came to you last year and asked you to put a stop to. We want brew pub licenses to go to real Maine brewers, not restaurateurs who are dabbling in brewing in order to own two tiers. So I apologize for being blunt, but that is how we see this situation. Mr. Haskell is a member of the Brewers Guild last year. There is no way on God's green earth he couldn't have been aware of all this going on. We had years of discussion in the Guild about how to take this forward and what to do. Mr. Boland got personal phone calls alerting him to the fact that we were working on this project.
Ms. Knox. your
I'll
time
stop
has
there.
come
Thank
to
you,
an end.
Senator.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Knox from the committee at this time? Seeing none, we appreciate you being here.
Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Is there anyone else present who wishes to testify in opposition to LD 2155?
Thank you. My name is Tobias Parkhurst. I'm co-founder of Kushnock Brewing Company. We have 85 year-round employees with locations in Augusta and Waterville. I'm here to speak in opposition of LD 2155. Navigating a small business is very complex. Around every corner, there's a pitfall, and many lessons are learned the hard way. We've worked really hard at Kushnock to stay in front of the challenges, provide a safe, high-quality product and experience for our employees and our communities. We have grown following the rules as explained to us by the governing agencies and have been discouraged when we see others push by with either inconsistent application or misunderstanding of the rules. The rule up until the most recent legislation was one restaurant license per brewery license. When an opportunity arose for us to open a new restaurant, we either had to include a brewery or not expand. A free market can't be more free for some than others. And I want to be clear, we're in this very uncomfortable situation because some folks were granted licenses that did not conform to the law when those licenses were granted, while others, like us, have been denied. Last year in the hearing for LD 1456, which they're trying to overturn today, the Bablo director testified, under current law, a small state manufacturer is eligible for one license for on-premise consumption per manufacturing facility. This is the interpretation of the law that we have been held to. LD 1456 increased the number from 1 to 3. It did not make current legal businesses illegal. We want to have breweries that grow because they've got good product and good values, not because they scaled retail holdings or boxed other people out. LD 2155 erodes the three-tier system and will open the door for small businesses like mine to be hurt. I respectfully urge this committee to oppose LD 2155. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. The chair was an error in not starting the clock, but you certainly finished under 3 minutes. So I appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, we thank you for being here. We're taking testimony in opposition to LD 2155 in person. Please step forward if that is your position on this legislation.
Good afternoon, Senator Hickman and distinguished members of the committee. My name is Sarah Bryan. I'm the Executive Director of the Maine Brewers Guild. We represent more than 150 independently owned breweries across the state, employing thousands of Mainers, and I'm here today in opposition to LD 2155. Maine's craft brewing industry thrives upon the foundation that quality goods made by hardworking people in the small towns and cities of Maine will always make a positive impact in local agriculture, the community, and the Maine economy. Our members invest heavily in equipment, facilities, safety systems, and skilled workers. They do this in one of the highest cost business environments in the country, facing higher energy, transportation, and labor costs here than in many other states. Yet Maine breweries continue to create jobs, anchor downtowns, and drive tourism, in no small part because state policy has historically supported small, locally owned manufacturers and fair access to market. Last session, this committee took an important and deliberate step by accepting LD 1456 and the brewing industry's self-selected parameters on the number of on-premise retail liquor licenses a manufacturer may hold. A decision resulting from years of discussion amongst brewers and reflective of a broad industry consensus, not about restricting growth, but about protecting the integrity of Maine's craft brewing sector and preventing operators from purchasing retail exclusivity. The framework adopted last year was thoughtful, balanced, and inclusive. It preserved room for growth while addressing a real problem: imbalanced retail expansion by entities with minimal in-state production and the consequences of a marketplace distortion, consumer confusion about what a brewery is, and crowding out of small producers who depend on retail and wholesale channels that accompanied the pre-existing loopholes in Title 28A. LD 2155 would undo that work. By doubling the number of retail licenses a manufacturer can hold and retroactively exempting certain licensees from the limits adopted in 2025, this bill would blur the line between manufacturing and retail, accelerate consolidation, and concentrate retail access under common ownership, creating a positive bias for larger, well-capitalized operators, while micro and independent Maine breweries, those who have invested, are pushed farther to the margins. This is precisely the kind of outcome the three-tier system is designed to prevent. When manufacturers are allowed to control more retail outlets, competition shifts away from product quality and innovation and towards ownership and capital. That dynamic disadvantages small producers and undermines the fairness of the marketplace. The proposed retroactive exemption and any other permanent carve-out based solely on license day would also serve to create inequity, entrench incumbency, and make it harder for new and smaller manufacturers to compete and grow. Maine's craft beverage industry has succeeded because policy has supported diversity, local ownership, and competition. An industry that contributes more than $740 million annually to the Maine's economy depends on maintaining that balance. LD 2155 moves us in the opposite direction by blurring the line between manufacturing and retail and weakening the framework this committee adopted just last year. On behalf of the Maine Brewers Guild and the independent breweries we represent, I respectfully ask that you stand by the considerate, consensus-driven decision you made last session and reject a bill that would reopen and destabilize that balance. Thank you. I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you for your testimony right on time. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, we appreciate you being here. We are taking testimony in opposition to LD 2155 in person. May I see a show of hands of how many more people in the room are going to testify in either position, opposed or neither for nor against? Okay, thank you. You may proceed whenever you are ready, sir.
Good afternoon, Senator Hickman, Representative Supika, and members of the committee. My name is Abe Firth. I am co-founder of Orono Brewing Company, and I reside in Old Town. I'm also a volunteer board member for the Maine Brewers Guild. I have my testimony, which I will not read, and I also have testimony from Rob Todd, the founder of Allagash Brewing, which I hope to be able to read a little bit of. Rob Todd is one of the most well-respected voices in craft beer industry in the country. Just a couple things I want to clarify. One, this the bill that we passed together last year was not driven by large, powerful breweries. It was driven by consensus among many breweries, from the smallest to the largest, that felt like we needed to help Bablo better regulate this industry. The assumption or the statement that there were unlimited licenses allowed previously is inaccurate. The fact was it was one brewery license to one retail license. People got around that by putting a $3 bucket in a closet and calling themselves a brewery. Small breweries are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on equipment. Large breweries are spending tens of millions of dollars in an investment. I think we really can all agree that if you want to invest into becoming a brewery, then please do that. And if you want to be a restaurateur, please do that. And I think that you'll hear from many members today virtually who, like myself, are a little bit nervous because Mr. Boland is one of the most powerful restaurateurs in the state. And we all know that our tap lines, which are precious to us, are in jeopardy by testifying against this bill. So with that said, I think that again, Rob Todd has been incredibly well respected part of the brew industry for years. I'd like to just make a couple points that he wrote. So this is Rob Todd's words. The Maine Brewers Guild recently spent the better part of a year coming to a consensus, both among brewers and with affiliated trade partners, to address an emerging industry landscape that had a clear potential to limit competition and make it more difficult for all brewers to have equal access to market. The result of this coordinated effort was LD 1456. LD 1456 was an important milestone for a number of reasons. If you visit nearly any other country in the world, you don't see a thriving craft beer market. That's because generally there are essentially no limitations on brewery ownership or of restaurants or bars. Breweries are effectively able to buy exclusivity at retail. This restricts competition, favors the big players, and makes it especially difficult for small players to have access to market. LD 1456 thankfully minimizes that threat. In the US, we as craft brewers are fortunate because there are provisions in the FAA that put limits on brewery ownership of retail licenses. This ensures an open and fair marketplace that is relatively free of the retail exclusion very common in other countries. I see I'm almost at time. I just want to hope that you'll ask some questions about the three-tier system and why we very strongly think that it's important to maintain.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions from the committee? Chair recognizes Representative Boyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Similar to my previous question, I guess I'll rephrase it relative to what I've been hearing. What would you say to folks who testified against the raising the self distribution limit for breweries and how that would affect and undermine the three-tiered system? Why was that okay and this is different?
So I believe strongly that if I, as a brewery, decided to buy into a distribution company, and I was brought forth to chat about that with you folks, it would be very clear that I'd have to either sell the brewery or sell the distribution company. Self-distributing a brewery is different than being part of a distribution company, because at that point, you're only selling your own products to get them into market. The reason that is different, in my opinion, is that there are only so many distributors in this state, and there's very, very, very many small craft breweries who may or may not have the interest from distributors. So it makes sense for very tiny breweries to be able to grow in order to become attractive to a distributor who would want to sell their products.
Are there any other questions, Mr. Firth, from the committee? Chair recognizes Representative Speaker.
Why is the three-tier system important to craft breweries?
If you travel, thank you for that question. If you travel outside of the country, for example, I went to Scotland with my wife for our 10-year wedding anniversary. We found the same 5 beers at every pub because the pubs were owned by the breweries, and there was no craft beverage industry that we were able to see there. The three-tier system allows the incredibly important craft beer industry, the distributors and the retailers, to all flourish side by side. And it's worked. It's why Maine has one of the best craft beer industries in the country, and why the United States is recognized as a leader in the craft beer industry, while retailers and distributors are also able to succeed.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Chair recognizes Representative Frost.
I was just thinking, you bring up a good point. How about other states? Vermont, big in microbreweries, do they have similar rules to us, or do they do things differently? How does that work?
We're very fortunate that our executive director, who testified earlier, has a great relationship with guild leaders throughout the country. So when we were working on LD 1456, there was a lot of communication with states all around, as well as communication from the Brewers Association, which is our national trade organization. And many states have faced similar issues that we're facing and have put forward legislation that solve those issues. For example, California has a cap, and that cap is similar to our cap, despite the fact that California is a state with much, much more commerce.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
We are taking testimony in person, opposition to LD 2155. And Madam Clerk, seeing no other people in person, can you please promote everyone whose hands are raised? We're going to promote all of the people whose hands are raised who are testifying in opposition. Please do not turn on your camera or your mic. until recognized by the chair. And so when you are promoted, we will take testimony from Connor Lacasse of Island Park Brewing first.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes, sir. Your
Thank
3
you.
minutes will begin as soon as you speak. Thank you.
Sure. My name is Connor Lacasse, and I am an owner and operator of Island Park Brewing just down the road in Winthrop. And I'm here to speak in opposition to LD 2155. We opened our doors just a year and a half ago. And in the world of brewing, Island Park is exceptionally small. Like many small Maine breweries, we face numerous challenges, one of the most significant being access to the market. And I just want to put an emphasis and make sure that the committee knows that this testimony is not coming from a multi-million-dollar brewery. Last session, this committee passed legislation limiting the number of on-premise retail liquor licenses a manufacturer may hold. These limits were the result of years of discussion among brewers who recognize that without them, the integrity and sustainability of Maine's craft beverage industry were at risk. I'm here today. I strongly support this current legislation, which promotes equitable access for small breweries like mine, while also establishing appropriate limits for larger producers. And as you've seen here today, Maine's brewers are a passionate community of individuals. We are proud of what we make, proud of how we make it, and proud that Mainers see us as their breweries. LD 2155 would dilute what it means to be a Maine brewery. It would devalue the hundreds of thousands of dollars each brewery invests in infrastructure and equipment, and ultimately will cheapen Maine craft beer. For these reasons, I respectfully urge the committee to strongly oppose LD 2155. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony, sir. Are there any questions for Mr. Lacasse from the committee? I apologize for mispronouncing your last name, sir. Chair recognizes Representative Speaker.
Thank you. And I apologize. I just took a bite of chocolate when I started to ask this question. So I was also out of the room for some of the testimonies, but something that you said kind of sparked a question for me and I know that you're not the only person that has said this, so I apologize that you're just the only person that might have to answer this question. Devaluing your investments. And I think back to kind of the rise of the craft brew industry in Maine and how it was done in the face of large breweries anyways, and how people chose to drink craft brew anyways. So I was wondering how you see this could devalue quality craft beer. Because if what you're producing is quality, how does it devalue it? Can you talk me through that thought process, please?
Absolutely. I think that it would open up restaurateurs to essentially monopolize the marketplace. So I would say, this is a precedent that would open up larger, maybe domestic breweries to come in and just add more liquid beer to our marketplace that us as small Maine craft breweries see as maybe not as high a quality as our product. That is, I would say, my definition of it. I'm sure other people have other definitions, and I would love you to ask that question of them.
No, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Lacasse from the committee? Seeing none, we appreciate you being here today, sir.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes David Rowland from some brewing company in York to provide testimony.
Yes. Hello, my name is David Rowland. I am the head brewer and part owner of Some Brewing Company down in York, Maine, as well as our sister brewery, York Beach Beer Company in York Beach. I am on to speak in opposition to LD 2155. I agree fully with everything that's already been said. Ultimately, I'll keep this quick. It just opens the door, as has been said, for other very well-funded operators to come in and just dominate the industry that us smaller and larger breweries have fought so hard to cultivate in the state of Maine. It's really just unfair for someone with enough cash to come in, call themselves a brewery, and barely make any beer and circumvent the three-tier system that you've heard all about already. With that, the three-tier system, it protects us independent producers and retailers as well as the consumer. As Mr. Firth had said, my wife and I, when we travel, we look for breweries, and I can't tell you how many times we have gone somewhere only to find out that they were a restaurant group. They didn't even brew their own beer, but they called themselves a brew pub or a brew house or some other clever little twist on it. And it's just not fair to the consumer when you're looking for something authentic that we work so hard to build here in Maine. And simply in this particular case, this would give few people a very big advantage over the rest of us that are just trying to make an honest go of it, as well as would harm future brewers that want to get into the industry. And I think ultimately, we just passed 1456 in May, and we haven't even done a full cycle on this yet. And as far as I know, most people were warned of this, and it just seems to me like it would be a disservice to the rest of us to change it so soon, as well as, just simply kind of plow over it because a few people don't like it. So that's my testimony. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Rowland. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none. Representative Graham, I did not see you walk in. You may introduce yourself if you wish. I did not see you. I don't know how long you've been sitting there. I've been really busy on.
Been hiding in the corner here. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I apologize for being late. I serve on Health and Human Services as well and worked a bill in that committee, and we unanimous report out of committee, and it was my bill. So that was why I was there. So I apologize for being late. And I am Representative Annie Graham. I serve the people of North Yarmouth and the majority of Gray, House District 105.
Thank you. We'll take testimony in opposition from Spencer Janney. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Spencer Janney. I'm here to testify in opposition to this bill. I am, like Connor, a very new brewery to the state. I own and operate Naiad Country Brewery up in Orland, Maine, near Ellsworth and the entrance to Down East. And I have a nano brewery, that is self-built. I drove around the country with a U-Haul trailer, purchasing used equipment from places that were upgrading or going out of business. And it's still a very, very capital intensive business to get into when you set out to make your own beer and provide it to customers. And for 10 years before embarking on this endeavor myself, I worked in breweries both around this country and around the world. And I saw in Australia when I worked there the manifestation of this exact issue. And there is not a robust three-tier system to keep the retailers, manufacturers, and distributors separate. As we've heard about, people referencing Scotland and other places they've been, most bars you would go to in the country would have the same 4 beers on their lines. And in order to find authentic, locally made craft beer, you had to go to the single tasting room of whatever brewery's product you're trying to enjoy. I know for myself, it's been key while being still so new, and especially in a rural area, to the industry in this state, to be able to show up myself with samples to restaurants and bars, share my samples and my product and my passion with the folks the publicans at those places in person, and for them to have the, you know, freedom and ability to take on new products from small creators that they have interest in. And the last thing I'll say on that point, to go back to the question of the devaluation of craft, how would this new bill being passed devalue the craft beer that we create? I'm already seeing it in my small tap room. I have folks who come to my small 2-barrel brewery and tap room with picnic tables. They look at my 8-beer tap list and they ask me, are any of these beers made here? And I say it's so confusing to me because from within the industry as a brewer, I assume that, of course, they're all made here. That's what I'm doing. That's what we do. But the erosion of what it means to be a craft brewery is what's at stake here. And I think that it's important to limit the amount of, you know, if you have one small, you know, 1-barrel nano system that you make a couple batches on a month, and then 12 restaurants that are claiming brew pub status, it makes it very confusing what we're talking about when we talk about craft beer. That's my testimony. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Janney. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, we appreciate you being here. Oh, excuse me, Mr. Janney, please return. There is a question from the chair. Chair recognizes Representative Topeka with a question.
I apologize.
No worries.
Not the most serious a question, but when I started thinking, so when you were in Scotland, did you drink more beer or Scotch whiskey?
I have unfortunately never been to Scotland.
Okay.
But when I
Alright.
was in Australia, I certainly
Okay.
was a beer drinker. I don't know what their whiskey industry
Okay.
looks like.
I was wondering, and I was wondering when you went into the bars if you saw a plethora of Scotch whiskey available to you. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. The chair recognizes Will Fisher from Portland. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, Senator Hickman, members of the committee. My name is Will Fisher. I'm the founder and operator of Austin Street Brewery in Portland. I'm here to speak in opposition of LD 2155. Austin Street was founded in 2014, and we're honored to be celebrating our 12th anniversary this year. We started our brewery with our own money and have grown the business organically over the last decade. In fact, along with my co-founder, we probably own 100% of the company still. With great pride and dedication to Maine craft beer, we have grown the brewery to support 20 employees and have produced over 700,000 gallons of Maine beer, which has been distributed all over New England, along with millions of dollars into Maine's economy. When we started, I was just kind of getting a lot of flashbacks to when Spencer was providing his testimony. We started with a 1-barrel system, so I got to beat on size there, Spencer. We're nowhere near the size of Allagash, but maybe someday. So we're kind of stuck right in the middle. I think maybe the most helpful thing I can provide today is just some direct example of how this LD from last year changed Austin Street's trajectory, which is significant. So we were under the 1-to-1 ratio in the past. So we had to have a single brewery license to have a single tap room, right? So we started with our original location, and we added a second location a few years after opening in downtown Portland. And at both locations, we had to maintain a brewery and a brewing system and all the equipment and the people and the ingredients and the inventory at both locations to be able to serve our beer from the tap room. It was very expensive to do that. We didn't really need the original brewing system because we had a big, nice system in downtown Portland here. With the passing of the legislation last year, we were able to actually decommission the old brewing system. We're able to end all the maintenance and the work and actually able to save a bunch of money. We hired a new employee. We increased our health insurance coverage for our employees to 100%. And we actually purchased some new equipment as well for our downtown brewery that allowed basically our both tap rooms to continue operating and allowed us to focus all of our efforts on one manufacturing setup. And what's cool about the bill that was passed last year, because we brew over 1,000 barrels a year, we don't just get the 3-to-1 ratio. The fact we brew over 1,000, we get 6-to-1. So Austin Street can actually now instead of have just one retail location for our downtown brewery, we can actually have 6 retail locations now. So this was actually an insanely great increase and opportunity for us. Well, obviously, it's a big while for us to grow into something that size, but at least the opportunity is there for us. And it was just a really great wrap up to the year last year for us and our team. So I just want to say in closing that I've been a member of the Maine Brewers Guild Legislative Committee for over a decade, and I've been involved in several legislative committee changes. My firsthand experience, I can assure you that Austin Street would not be making beer today if it wasn't for these changes. Last session's legislation has done a great job of defining and protecting what makes Maine beer so special while allowing all Maine-based beverage producers the ability to flourish. LD 2155 is set to turn back the clock on that progress. For these reasons, I respectfully urge the committee to strongly oppose LD 2155. Thank you for your time and consideration. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Fisher. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none. We appreciate you being here with us today.
Thank you very much.
Testimony from Jennifer Lever, excuse me, or Lever.
Lever, like the soap.
There you go. Thank you very much. I caught it as soon as I saw it spelled again. Thank you for being here. You may begin your testimony whenever you wish.
Thank you, Senator Hickman, Representative Suka, and the members of the committee. My name is Jen Lever, and I am a resident of South Portland and here today as the president of Baxter Brewing and the president of the Maine Brewers Guild to speak in support of the bill. I'd like to share my testimony, but I also just want to make a comment that I hope that the committee has been able to take the pride that I have felt as different members of our association have represented themselves here today and seen the size and diversity that makes up Maine craft brewing. The representation that we are $100 million companies is false, and I'd like to share that the average Maine brewer makes 250 barrels a year. Back to my written testimony, Baxter was founded in Lewiston more than 15 years ago with the simple goal to represent the state of Maine in a world-class way. Today, we employ 54 people in Lewiston-Auburn area across brewing, packaging, quality control, hospitality, and operations. We've invested more than $10 million in equipment, facilities, and infrastructure right here in Maine. Those long-term investments made with the belief that this state still values local manufacturing, real production, and fair markets. Brewing is not just branding, it is capital investment, highly regulated, and margin-thin work. Every beer we make requires equipment, skilled labor, compliance, quality control, and time. We choose to do this in Maine, even though costs here, labor, energy, transportation are higher than in many other states, because we believe that Maine's craft legacy and its communities. What brings me here today is a growing imbalance in the system. More and more businesses are able to represent themselves as breweries without making the same level of investment, employing production of workers, or meaningfully participating in Maine's manufacturing economy. As restaurant groups and retail entities gain the ability to bypass traditional distribution networks, true Maine producers like us lose access to shelf space, to tap lines, and to consumers. This creates two serious problems. First, it limits transparency and competition. The market becomes less open, less fair, and less honest. Second, it creates real consumer confusion. People think they are supporting a local brewery when in many cases they are not. They are supporting a restaurant group that produces little to no beer, employs no production staff, and sources little very locally. This purposeful blurring of the definitions devalues the work that we do every day and erodes the trust. This bill matters because it restores balance. It protects access to market for true Maine producers. It reinforces the words that matter, definitions matter, and fairness matters. This bill does not stifle innovation. It strengthens it by ensuring that those who choose to build, brew, and employ in Maine are not penalized for doing so. Thank you for your time and consideration. I respectfully urge you to support this legislation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jennifer Lever. I just want to be clear. Are you in support of the legislation that would, or are you in opposition to the legislation?
Strongly opposed.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that for the record. Your testimony sounds like you're in opposition to it, but you said in support twice. So I just want to make sure that we have your testimony in the record correctly.
I appreciate the clarity. It's strongly opposed, yes.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, we appreciate your testimony today.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes Nicholas Bonavides. And I'm apologizing again for butchering names today, but I do like to try. Please introduce yourself.
No problem. Thank you, Senator Hickman and members of the committee. My name is Nick Bonavides. I'm a resident of Portland and president, co-owner, and one of the operators of Bellflower Brewing Company, a family-owned brewery run by my family, myself, and the Page family. We currently employ 13 people, including the 4 owners, and we are absolutely not a $100 million business, to the point where I am calling you from my office, which does not have heat and is about 25 degrees right now. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today in opposition of LD 2155. Maine's craft beverage industry did not grow by accident. It grew because of thoughtful legislation and incredibly strong community support that valued independent manufacturing, local ownership, and fair access to market. Maine's natural resources and agricultural base have helped Maine specifically become a national leader in craft beer. And all of us, everyone on this call, has invested heavily to that legacy. Since opening our relatively small brewery, we're about the same size as Will. We have invested more than $1 million in brewing equipment, infrastructure, skilled trades. Building a production capable facility in Portland, Maine is expensive and extremely complex, as I'm sure you can appreciate. Maine has historically maintained a careful balance between manufacturing and retail interests. And that balance gave small producers confidence that investing in jobs and manufacturing would be met with fair market access. Access to market remains one of the biggest challenges for us small producers. We've only been in business for 5 years now, and most of us operate on a narrow seasonal window, with summer tourism often determining whether we are profitable at all. Visitors come to Maine seeking authentic experiences and products that reflect craftsmanship and the place. When minimal production entities operate retail venues under manufacturing privileges, it undermines that authenticity and creates confusion about what a brewery is. And I have specific experience with that in other markets. But last session, this committee adopted limits on manufacturer-held retail licenses after years of thoughtful discussion and consideration that was open to all Maine breweries, so all the members and anyone who is a Maine brewer. LD 2155 would undo all of that work by expanding retail license limits and creating retroactive exemptions based on license date. It would accelerate consolidation and concentrate retail access under common ownership. The result would be a system that rewards scale and timing of retail expansion over production, job creation, and local investment, making it harder for small independent breweries and producers to compete. I'm especially concerned about the permanent exemption for licenses issued before May 23rd, 2025. Exemptions like this, in my mind, create inequality and disadvantage for newer and smaller businesses trying to enter the market today and make the same level of investments that we have already made. For these reasons, I respectfully urge the committee to oppose LD 2155, and thank you for your time and consideration, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you for offering your testimony on this legislation today. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, stay warm.
Thank you.
Is anyone else present or online who wishes to testify in opposition to LD 2155? Seeing none, is anyone present or online who wishes to testify neither for nor against LD 2155? Welcome back, Director.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Senator Hickman, Representative Supika, and members of the Joint Standing Committee on Veterans and Legal Affairs. My name's Louis Lucchini. I'm the director of Bablo, and I'm here to testify neither for nor against LD 2155, an act to clarify certain laws governing licenses for sale of liquor by manufacturers. I think, as we've heard, the legislature passed LD 1456 last session, which expanded the number of on-premise retail liquor licenses a manufacturer could have. It went from, prior to that, it was you could have one retail establishment per manufacturing facility. It expanded 1 to 3. The Bureau was in support of that. We viewed it as a way to simplify licensing processes for business and reducing costs to comply with regulations. This bill proposes, as you've heard, to increase the number of on-premise licensees per manufacturer to 12. There's also a grandfathering clause, which you've heard about. We have concerns with the grandfathering clause and how broad it is. From a regulatory perspective, we would question what requirements would apply for a manufacturer if this were to pass. As written, it's not entirely clear to us what the standard would be, if it'd be 1 to 1, 1 to 3. All we see is in the bill, it would say may be issued 1 or more on-premises retail license. And generally, we don't want regulatory discretion. We prefer to have you tell us how to do it, and then we enforce the law. As was mentioned, we have a 3-tier system in Maine. Those provisions are all in Section 707 Title 28A, Section 707. And the default in that law just prohibits any cross-tier ownership. If you're in the top tier, you can't own other tiers, with the exception, with certain exceptions. You can have, obviously, they're under 1355A, we spell out, and that's what this bill amends. The exceptions to that, the 1-to-1, 1-to-3 ratio. So we just want regulatory clarity so that we aren't in a position where we could issue a bunch or not if the committee chose to go forward. We also just wanted to flag one technical issue in section 1 of the bill, in the paragraph starting around line 30. Because it states that if you have one manufacturing license, you can have up to 12 retail licenses. And then further down, it says if you have at least 2 manufacturing licenses, you have to collectively manufacture at least 1,000 barrels in order to have 12 there. So it kind of conflicts with itself. We just ask for a little clarity there. It almost makes it sound like it's harder to get 12 if you have 2 breweries, but those are kind of technical changes. Happy to answer any questions that the committee has.
Chair recognizes Senator Timberlake. Thank you, Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Director, for being here. I guess my question I'd ask, if you want to bring it back to the work session, I'm great with that, is after hearing the testimony that you've heard today, find a solution to the gentleman's problem. I would ask that what you'd come back with a recommendation, because I can see problems with this in 2 different ways. As someone who's in this business a little bit. But so I guess I'd ask for advice. Testifying either for or against isn't really fair. In a sense, I'm gonna hold you to the block on this one. Because we need some guidance here of is this interfering with the 3-tier system? Is it not interfering with the 3-tier system? Is there a better way to approach this? I agree with you, the grandfather clause is not a good clause that's within this. So I would ask that when you come back to the workshop, that you come back with some thoughts of how we might amend this that would either work or not work, or explain how it interferes with the 3-tier system and why it shouldn't happen. And, because I looked at it as saying that, they might have to become a distributor or self-distribute because they can do that to their restaurants and then get around the system. But if there's some different licenses that have to come into play and some different things that come in. So I would just like to have that conversation at the workshop.
Yeah, we'll think it through. It's obviously a really difficult situation.
It is.
And we kind of view it as a policy matter. Not to push it back onto you, but
policy
yeah,
is
I
part
got
of,
yeah.
If we create policy that doesn't work.
You may proceed. It's not the work session though. So
Yeah,
make sure there's a
but
question
I'm
there.
asking, but we precede you as we have to make policy that you need to enforce. So we think it's important that you give us information of what you think our policy should look like or have an influx that you're going to need to enforce. So I would ask that you bring us back that recommendation.
Yeah, we'll work on it with our office. And to kind of answer one part about the ownership piece. So the 3-tier system prohibits ownership between tiers. So you have the top tiers, producers, middle tier, wholesalers, bottom tier retailers, as you all know. But there are exceptions in the law, which this is one of the exceptions, 3-tier system, that small manufacturers can also own a retail facility. And we think 3-tier system is very important. Historically, it's helped prevent market concentration. It addressed a lot of problems that had happened previously where huge companies could have come in and set up exclusive shops. That's why there's federal laws that are kind of related to that. And just access to the market, for small producers to have access to the market. And that's, I think, to the point about self-distribution. I think especially when you're up and coming and small, it's important to be able to do that. That way you can get your product out into the market because you may not be a big deal to the very limited number of wholesalers at the time. And they work with people all the time, but if you're just a tiny client, it may be hard to get in or afford to get in. And that's why
No,
the self-distribution.
I just was hoping that we get to the workshop that you could have that information for us.
Are there any other
Yeah.
questions for the director? Chair recognizes Representative Frost.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I guess I'm just still so confused. When we were debating this, last session, I guess I just don't understand why we didn't hear more about all this opposition at that time. What was it? Was it just, yeah, I mean, could you explain that at all?
I can't really explain why people didn't testify in opposition. Yeah, I'm not sure why. Yeah, to be honest.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Chair recognizes Representative Boyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Director. I would echo Senator Timberlake's ask for some kind of immaculate compromise. Can you give the committee a sense of scale here? How many licensees are not in compliance or would be affected by this?
Yeah, thanks for reminding me. I forgot to mention that. I know Mr. Cloutier had mentioned that. I think really it's 3 to 4 maybe businesses that are in this position. And we've obviously taken a, slow, try to help come into compliance thing, we're not going to just shut people down. Obviously, we're going to try to get people into compliance wherever we can. So, but it's limited. I'd say 3, maybe 4 that we know of now, but we haven't gone a full year since the law's been in place. So we'll sometimes see it as people apply for more licenses, but I think it's fairly limited in scope. Yeah.
So prior to the legislation in question passing, why were these 4 or 3 entities or more, depending on what you find, able to get the licenses that they got from Bablo?
Yeah, so the issue, I think this is what raised the issue for the brewers, is that under the previous law prior to LD 1456 last session, you could have a 1-to-1 ratio of manufacturing facility to retail. And so if somebody who owned a lot of restaurants wanted to get into the brewery business, they would get a federal brewer's notice and then apply for a brewery license with Bablo. And that's kind of our requirement. And so every restaurant would be essentially what would happen is people would license their restaurant as a brewery and call it a brewery. And then that's something that we began to notice also, is that a lot of breweries were reporting 0 production. And I think that's the issue that the guild has raised, is that people would license it as a brewery. That way they could have enough restaurants to coincide. So it was never a situation where somebody had 1 brewery and 10 restaurants. They would just have a lot of breweries and a lot of restaurants at the 1-to-1 ratio.
Okay. And so I would say then that that's why they got the licenses. And then upon review or inspection or complaint or any or all of the above, it was determined that they weren't actually breweries because they weren't really manufacturing any beer.
We could see, because we see through excise tax reports, that some people weren't brewing anything. It'd be 0 production breweries.
Okay.
Yeah.
That answers that question. Any other questions for the director? Chair recognizes Representative Speak Up.
I'll preference this with, it's probably really naive, but I started thinking about how in Europe, they have strict definitions on what certain food productions are called. And is there any way to, maybe not in this legislation, but protect the word craft brewery or craft beer or things along those lines so that there's a standard of what we call it, so there's not these loopholes where you can just have a bucket in the corner and call yourself a craft brewer? I don't know if there's an answer for it now, but do you kind of get the gist of what I'm saying? Like in Italy, you can't just call yourself, like this type of tomato unless you're grown in this certain region, sometimes on a certain hillside. I don't think we have to get that strict, but is there a way that we can have standards on what is craft beer in Maine?
Yeah, I think that's what LD 1456 attempted to do last session, was to put in a standard. But we can try to think through other ways that we could classify it. Yeah, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, but yeah, it's more just the ownership provisions of the 3-tier system.
Mm-hmm.
From
Thank you. Any other
regulatory.
questions for the director? He will be back for the work session. and thank you, Director.
Yep.
Is there anyone else wishing to testify neither for nor against? LD 2155.
Good afternoon. I know the hour grows late, and so I won't prolong this. My name is Cheryl Timberlake. I'm a resident of Mount Vernon. I represent the Maine Beverage Distributors Association. They are the family-owned and operated independent beverage distributors, including beer, wine, spirits, energy drinks, etc. There probably isn't a stronger advocate for the three-tier system than myself and my association. So take my neither for nor not in outside of that contents, but really trying to assist you in the words and the policy. And by that, this really is a business model decision. You enter manufacturing and then you produce. The statute, however, did not have policy parameters on those definitions. The distributors found through the course in their marketplace that there were entities defined in one category that were in fact not accomplishing those goals. So we were pleased to see LD 1456 as an attempt last year to start to create some definitions on volume and brewery. We recognize and respect our brewery partners. We work with them in the marketplace to ensure access. We want all of us to provide adults with quality craft product. In addition, however, as the independent tier, we also want our retail category to be successful, both on and off premise. So what we're sitting and looking at is what are the correct parameters to own, to operate, and to manufacture. And what I want to bring to your attention is a provision that has not yet been necessarily identified. But when you are a Chapter 43B, you have the ability to own and operate that privilege of manufacturing and on-premise. You also can self-distribute. And so you can imagine from the distribution tier, we watch this very carefully. We want to know where product is going and what's happening in the marketplace. So the numbers and the parameters here from a policy perspective serve purpose and add value. And so we respected LD 1456. What's in front of you today for 2155 to us should have been part of a compromise of the conversations last year. So to hear it brought up now is disheartening. It's regrettable. I think that I respect the committee's conversation about policy. I want to make sure that from a distribution standpoint, you also understand the other privileges that are attached to these licenses. Numbers, quantity, and production volume really matter in the marketplace and ensure the integrity of the three-tier system. I did not plan to testify. You know, I would always have written comments for you. I am happy to provide that to you. Will be a resource, and I'm happy to participate in the work session and answer any questions now.
Thank you, Ms. Timberlake. Yes, if you could write something down, that would be great.
I'll do so.
And if you have any policy recommendations in that, you can write those down as well.
Appreciate that.
Thank you. Any
Thank-
questions from Ms. Timberlake from the committee?
Thanks.
Say none. Is there anyone else present who wish to testify neither for nor against LD 2155? Seeing none, are there any questions for our analysts for the work session? Seeing none, Chair closes public hearing on LD 2155. That concludes our agenda for the day. Ms. Olson, did you have anything for us? And then without objection, the Joint Standing Committee on Veterans and Legal Affairs stands adjourned. Okay.